organising local group meetings. Bob's life has been well spent and no one here would dispute that. Thank you very much.
It being 2 o'clock, in accordance with Standing Order 43, the time for member statement has concluded. I have received a return to the writ which I issued on the 6th of January 2014 for the election of a member to serve for the electoral division of Griffith in the state of Queensland to fill the vacancy caused by the resignation of the Honourable Kevin Michael Rudd. By endorsement of the writ, it is certified that Terry Megan Butler has been elected. Admit her. Well, it's not quite an ecclesiastical arrival. Admit the new member. I call the clerk.
Do you, Terry Megan Butler, solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that you will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law?
I do. I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I inform the House that the Minister for Trade and Investment will be absent from question time this week while he participates in the ministerial discussions as part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations in Singapore. The Minister for Foreign Affairs will answer questions on his behalf.
Questions? Are there any questions? I call the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. On the 19th of February, the Prime Minister said he was shocked at the job losses. Shocked at Toyota, shocked about Holden, shocked about Alcoa. Prime Minister, is the government's state of shock the reason why there is no plan on transition, no plan to create new jobs, no plan for innovation from his government?
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, I do deeply regret the job losses at the various businesses that the Leader of the Opposition has mentioned. I deeply regret them. And our plan to create jobs and to boost prosperity starts with scrapping the carbon tax. It starts with scrapping the carbon tax. It continues with scrapping the mining tax. It goes on with restoring the Australian Building and Construction Commission. It goes on with reducing red and green tape. This is what we need in this country if we are to create the jobs, the secure and sustainable jobs of the future. That is our plan. what is the Leader of the Opposition's plan? Because the Leader of the Opposition has consistently opposed everything that this government has tried to do to create jobs. The Leader of the Opposition's plan is to keep the carbon tax, a $9 billion hit on jobs. The Leader of the Opposition's plan is to keep the mining tax. Again, an anti-Western Australian tax. The Leader of the Opposition's plan is to oppose the restoration of the Australian Building and Construction Commission, because the problem—
We'll have some silence on my left.
Madam Speaker, with this Leader of the Opposition is that he cannot transcend his background as a union official.
I call the honourable member for Forrest.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on the impact the carbon tax is having on the Australian economy? How will scrapping the carbon tax support Australian jobs?
I call the honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do thank the member for a question. And, Madam Speaker, the government's plan to build a strong and prosperous economy, it does start with scrapping the carbon tax. And, Madam Speaker, scrapping the carbon tax will be good for jobs, it will be good for businesses, and it will be good for families' cost of living. Because, Madam Speaker, the carbon tax is a $9 billion a year hit on jobs. And it's not surprising, given the fact that this is a $9 billion a year hit on jobs, that unemployment is 110,000 people higher now than it was in July 2012 when the carbon tax was introduced. The carbon tax, even on the former government's own figures, is a giant handbrake on our economy. Members opposite know, because their figures said so, that our economy by mid-century will be $1 trillion smaller, a cumulative $1 trillion smaller with a carbon tax than without it. It's as if Australia was to close down for a year. It's as if Australia was to close down for a year because of members opposite and their carbon tax, and every single Australian's gross national income per head will be $5,000 a year less with a carbon tax than without one. That's a $5,000 a year hit on every Australian's income that this opposition wants to maintain in perpetuity. Now, Madam Speaker, right now, scrapping the carbon tax would make every single Australian household on average $550 a year better off. $550 a year better off thanks to scrapping the carbon tax. And scrapping the carbon tax will give industries like aluminium, a fighting chance not just to survive but to flourish. The Labor Party's own figures showed that by mid-century, under a carbon tax, aluminium production will be down by more than 60%. So every time an aluminium plant closes or scales down, that's just the carbon tax doing its job. That's just the carbon tax doing its job.
The member for Isaac.
Now, I'm pleased that the Leader of the Opposition is now visiting workplaces where jobs are at risk. I am very pleased that the Leader of the Opposition is doing that. But if he wants to help those workers, rather than just use them, he'll get out of the way and he will let the carbon tax repeal legislation go through.
I call the honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Since the Abbott government's been elected, thousands of jobs have been lost. Toyota, Holden, Forge in Western Australia, Alcoa in Geelong, Rio Tinto at Gove. Why hasn't the Prime Minister had the courage to visit these workers in their communities? Why is the Prime Minister a wimp when it comes to standing up for Australian jobs?
I call the Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's question is out of order. It contains epithets and argument, words that don't have any place in a question. If he wants to ask a sensible, straightforward question, I'm sure it'll be entertained by the House, but this is merely argument masquerading as a question. I'd ask you to rule it out of order.
I call the Manager of Opposition Business.
The issue of whether or not people are visiting workplaces was raised directly by the Prime Minister and is quite properly being addressed in this question.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, it was the inane remarks at the second half of the question that clearly made it into an argument, and the opposition should work out how to ask a straightforward question. Therefore, I'd ask you to rule it out. Maybe they could come back to it later in question time.
It might be helpful if the Leader of the Opposition rephrased his question.
Certainly, Prime Minister. Certainly, Madam Speaker. Since the Abbott government was elected, thousands of jobs have been lost. Alcoa and Geelong, Rio Tinto at Gove, West Australia's been Forge, Holden and Toyota. Why won't the Prime Minister demonstrate the fortitude to visit these workers in their communities?
That is not.
Why is the Prime Minister?
The member will resume his seat. The problem with the original question was argument contained within the question, and if the Leader of the Opposition will rephrase his question to leave out that argument, and please don't restate the beginning of it. We're familiar with that. It's the end of the question. That's the problem.
Madam Speaker. Why won't the Prime Minister talk to Holden workers, to Alcoa workers, to Gove workers, to Holden workers, to workers at Forge? Why won't he talk to them about their liberation?
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, I think the workers of this country, they don't want talk, they want action. That's what they want. They want action. And my job as Prime Minister...
Those on my left will desist.
My job as Prime Minister is to fight in this parliament for the policies that will help those workers. It will fight in this parliament for the policies that will enable those businesses to have a fighting chance of surviving and flourishing. And that's what I'm doing every day, Madam Speaker. I am doing what I can in this parliament as Prime Minister to remove the taxes and the regulation and the industrial lawlessness which is damaging the job prospects of these decent Australian workers. That's what I am doing, Madam Speaker, and I will do that as long as there is breath in my body.
I call the honourable member for Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is for the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline the outcomes of the G20 Finance Ministers' meeting held in Sydney this weekend? How will the outcomes of the meeting affect growth and jobs?
I call the honourable the Treasurer.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank the member for Higgins for the question and recognise that she came along to a number of meetings over the weekend. And there was a meeting of the G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors. It was the first significant ministerial meeting under Australia's presidency. And at the end of the meeting, Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, described Australia's presidency as action-oriented. And that's exactly what the Prime Minister promised at Davos earlier this year, that we would have a presidency of the G20 that would be focused on getting on with the job of building infrastructure, creating more jobs and repairing budgets. And it is so vitally important, not just for the world but for Australia, that we focus on the structural reforms to create the jobs. And only through structural reforms are we going to increase the speed of growth in the economy. The heavy lifting on economic growth cannot be left to central banks, be it in Australia or anywhere else in the world. Easy monetary policy is only a temporary source of growth. The only way you can have economic growth is to earn it. You have to earn it. And it only comes through structural change in economies to cope with the changing nature of the global economy. And that's why, out of the weekend, for the first time ever, G20 finance ministers laid down on the table a number, a real ambition for the next 5 years to increase global growth by over $2 trillion. That's tens of millions of new jobs across the world. Tens of millions of new jobs across the world. It's the first time it has happened. And why? Because every country in the G20 recognise that only through structural reform are you going to grow the economy and create jobs. And I was wondering what the reaction of the Labor Party would be. What would be the reaction of the Labor Party? And I love the member for Wills. He said this morning on the doors, he said, growth is not an end in itself. I heard over the weekend that Australian adults have grown by 6 kilos in recent times, and this is in fact a recipe for diabetes and heart disease. So it's not a good thing. Well, I guess I've been in recession for the last 12 months, haven't I? Oh dear. Oh dear. Growth's not a good thing. This is the man who was the Labor Party Parliamentary Secretary on Trade and School Education. Keep him away from the kiddies if he's going to give them that economics lesson.
I call the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. My question is to the Prime Minister.
I have quiet on my left.
My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Treasurer's comments on budget cuts. I quote, "All options are on the table." Considering the Prime Minister's election promise that there would be no changes to pensions under an Abbott government, will the Prime Minister rule out any changes to the pension as a result of the Commission of Audit?
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, I do thank the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs for a question, and I do remind her and the House of the scale of the fiscal challenge that members opposite have left us. I do remind the House of the scale of the fiscal challenge which has been left to us. Under the policies of the former government, we would get $123 billion in cumulative deficits over the forward estimates period, and under the policies of members opposite, debt was skyrocketing towards $667 billion. That's right. $123 billion in cumulative deficits and $667 billion in skyrocketing debt under members opposite. So there is a big challenge, and we will address it in ways consistent with our pre-election commitments.
His seat, the Manager of Opposition Business.
In order to be directly relevant, the Prime Minister needs to make some relevant mention at all to the commitment he made to pensioners. There was a commitment to pensioners, and he's not touching it at all.
Has the Prime Minister finished his answer? The Prime Minister has finished his answer. I call the honourable member for Denison.
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Communications. Minister, my office is being contacted almost daily by constituents who are being stuffed around by the NBN rollout in Tasmania. One pressing problem is the large number of individuals and businesses that have had their copper service disconnected but are waiting months for the NBN. Minister, such people and businesses are in trouble now. What's your plan to fix this mess now?
I call the Honourable the Minister for Communications.
I thank the honourable member for his question. As the honourable member is aware, the rollout of the NBN in Tasmania essentially stalled in July, and very little work was done since then, in large part because the contractor Vision Stream was not prepared to continue working for the rates it had previously agreed to. Since then, the NBN Co, under its new management, has had extensive negotiations with Vision Stream, and work has resumed, already on 17,000 premises and shortly to begin on another 19,000 premises, all of which are expected to be complete within this year, comfortably within this year. So we would, if that occurs, and we expect it will, we would have more premises passed with fibre by the NBN Co in Tasmania in this year than under 6 years under the Labor government. Now, the honourable member is concerned, as we all are, about people who have cancelled their service, for example, their Telstra service,
including Parramatta and Isaacs.
They cancelled their Telstra service in anticipation of the NBN Co connecting them at the time that the NBN Co had said they would. So they were told by the NBN Co, we'll connect you on such and such a day, and they cancelled their Telstra or Optus service. Then the NBN Co didn't turn up on time, missed appointments and so forth, and they were left in the lurch. Now, this is a real problem, and as the honourable member knows, this has been going on for some time. This is not something that's occurred since the election. And he asked me what we are doing about it. Well, the first thing is that we have changed the approach the NBN Co has to rolling out its network. Previously, it was totally focused on meeting numbers in its corporate plan and passing premises, so as could tick that box, without regard as to whether those premises could actually be activated. That is why there are so many thousands of premises, roughly about a third, which are in so-called service class 0 that can't be connected at all. So we are focusing now on activation, and the new Chief Operating Officer, Greg Adcock, is very, very focused on that indeed. It actually delivering what it should be. The object is to get people connected. So we're very alert to it. And I can just give the honourable member an example of some early progress. He'll note from our rollout figures we publish every week that the premises passed in Tasmania have not materially increased since July, although they will start to ramp up now. But the number of premises which are connected, which have a network termination device on the premises, have increased by 50%.
I call the honourable member for Barker. I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline the challenges ahead to address Australia's debt and deficit levels? What are the alternative approaches to the management of these budget challenges?
I call the honourable the Treasurer.
I thank the member for Barker for his question and recognise over the weekend G20 finance ministers spoke about the challenge of ongoing deficits. And it was Korea who said that they're going to have a surplus this year. Korea's going to have a surplus this year. Germany's been running surpluses since 2012. I remember when Wayne Swan promised a surplus. I remember. You got a good memory. I don't remember when Labor last delivered a surplus.
Yes, it was 1989.
Because that was 1989.
25 years ago.
That was the year of Roy, 1989. I remember that, but the fact is, Labor left us with $123 billion of deficits and debt approaching $667 billion. They made spending commitments that had no money behind them. And that was the way that Labor ran the budget. And of course, I want to turn to that oracle of wisdom about economic policy on the Labor side. Oh, the member for Wills. The member for Wills. I want him to be on the doors every day. He said this morning, he said, what we need are economic objectives such as low unemployment, low inflation, low interest rates and a balanced budget. They are the things that people could get excited about. Gee, I want to be at his home for a dinner party on a Saturday night. Anyway, they're the things people could get excited about. Low unemployment. Well, you know, the member for Wills should be asking his colleagues why, after just 6 years in office, they left the unemployment rate 200,000 people higher. 200,000 higher than what they inherited. And low interest rates and low inflation, well, you don't have to worry about that too much when you have 5 out of 6 years of below-trend growth, which is what Labor had. But how about this? There he is on the doors talking about a balanced budget. Balanced budget. Well, this is a new concept for Labor, a balanced budget. He said that's what the people can get excited about. I tell you what, I say to the member for Wills, instead of going to the doors in the morning, why don't you walk down the corridor and go into the Leader of the Opposition's office and just ask him why he is opposing $20 billion of savings in the Senate, $20 billion of savings in the Senate, $5 billion of those savings are what the member for Wills promised to introduce at the last election. You promised to introduce those at the last election, and now, like complete A-grade hypocrites, Labor is now opposing its own policies to fix the budget. Now they've gone into opposition. You know the great lesson of opposition? You've got to have consistent principles, and I hope the Leader of the Opposition is going to learn that.
Before I call the member for Corio, the member for Corio will resume his seat. The member for Corio will resume his seat. Before I call the member, I wish to advise that we have visiting us today the Honourable Mr John Baird, PC MP, Canadian Foreign Minister, His Excellency Michael Small, the High Commissioner of Canada, Mr John Light, Director General Cooperation, Foreign Minister's Office. And we also have with us the Honourable Wal Fife, former New South Wales member for Wagga Wagga and Minister in the New South Wales Legislative Assembly, and a former federal member for Farrer and for Hume, and also Minister in the Federal Parliament. We make all welcome. I call the honourable member for Corio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Last Tuesday, the Minister cautioned, and I quote, people to be very wary of unsubstantiated reports that may be put into the public domain, end quote. What caution did the Minister take in the very same press conference when he said that last week's death of Reza Barati at the Manus Island facility occurred outside the facility's perimeter?
I call the Honourable the Minister for Migration and Border Protection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before answering the member's question, I'm sure he would join me in expressing the condolences to the family of Mr Barati, and I offer those condolences on behalf of the government and myself for that tragic death that occurred at the Manus Island Centre last week. In relation to the question put by the member, as he would know, as a former minister, that morning and over the course of that night, I took several reports, both verbal and otherwise, regarding what had occurred that night. What happens in these situations, as ministers previous opposite will know, is that information can be patchy and it is rarely perfect on those first occasions. I reported the information I had as of that morning, and later that afternoon, when I returned to Canberra, I received further briefings and I gave a press conference where I said quite clearly in relation to where Mr Barati, known as the deceased at that time, the circumstances surrounding his death. And I said, in terms of the man who died, he had a head injury, and at this stage it is not possible to give any further detail on that, including now, based on subsequent reports, including where this may have taken place. On the afternoon of that very Tuesday, I further qualified the report I had given that morning. Over the course of that week, I received further briefings. I dispatched my Deputy Secretary to Manus Island. I dispatched General Campbell to Manus Island. And over the course of the weekend, on Friday night, on Saturday in particular, I received further information that made it very clear that it was important to make a further correction to that earlier report. Information is never perfect in those circumstances. Over the course of that week, I conducted 5 press conferences to update people on what was occurring at that centre. It was a terrible tragedy, what occurred. But the other point I'd make about what occurred on that night is, despite that terrible tragedy, the centre opened the next morning and it continues to operate today. That centre is an important part of our overall suite of border protection policies. I wouldn't describe it as the cornerstone of our policy. I would describe it as an important part of our policy. The part of our policy that has been most successful in ensuring that for 64 days and counting we have had not one successful people smuggling venture to Australia has been principally what we have done at sea. We stand by all of those policies because those policies are stopping the boats and they are saving lives.
Great answer. I call the honourable member for Wannon. The member for Wannon, on what basis are you rising?
I would like to seek your indulgence, Madam Speaker, just to very quickly associate the opposition with the condolences that have been expressed by the Minister in relation to the death of Mr Barati.
I call the honourable member for Wannon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure and Regional Development. How will the government's policies assist regional aviation and the jobs that it supports?
I call the Honourable the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question and for the privilege of being with him in his electorate during the break. It was good to see and talk about some of the important infrastructure projects that this government has planned for Wannon and the neighbouring electorates. But the member would also know how important regional aviation is for so much of country Australia. People who live in regional communities depend on aviation not just to get to other places of the country or around the world, but also for many of their basic services like health and education, the professional services that they need in their community, people who fly in or to provide those services, or alternatively, country people so often have to go to the cities to get the health care and other things that they need. So the aviation industry is very, very important to regional Australia. It's been an industry facing significant competition and obviously high cost. It's a difficult environment. However, since the carbon tax was put in place, the cost of regional aviation has increased dramatically. 6 cents a litre added to the cost of aviation kerosene and 5 cents a litre added to the cost of avgas. And that puts up the cost of operating aviation right across the country. And we all know that regional aviation companies have been reporting declining profitability. Sharp Aviation in the member's own electorate reckon that this tax is costing them $400,000 a year. $400,000 a year. Money that they find very difficult to recover from their passengers, and of course it affects then also their bottom profit margin. Rex have talked similarly about declining profit projections. There is therefore something that this parliament can do to make regional aviation more competitive, and that's get rid of the carbon tax. That's get rid of the carbon tax. If the opposition is serious about jobs in this country, then it should be voting to get rid of the carbon tax. It's a job-destroying tax. It's a service-destroying tax. It's a tax that tears particularly at regional communities because they have to pay such a significant share. So when members opposite talk about the need to look after Qantas and Virgin and the other major airlines, there is something this parliament can do right now. Right now. The Senate should vote to get rid of the carbon tax. That will tear hundreds of millions of dollars out of the cost structure of our airlines, make them more profitable, enable them to employ more people and provide better services for the people of Australia.
I call the honourable member for Corio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. In light of the Minister's previous answer, precisely at what time and on which day was the Minister first advised that the information he provided in his previous press conferences was wrong?
I will call the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, but I do note that much of the information sought was contained in the previous answer. But the Minister can have the call.
I'm happy to answer, Madam Speaker. I advised in my previous answer on the afternoon of the Tuesday I had received a further briefing, and I reported on that afternoon that there were conflicting reports. That's what I said on Tuesday afternoon. Over the balance of the week, I received further information, and on Saturday I received information that made it clear that it was essential to correct the record, which I did on Saturday. Now, Madam Speaker, there will be a formal review into these matters, and that formal review will investigate all of the issues that relate to this incident, and that will include how this centre was specified and who set it up and how it was set up. It'll go into the performance of the service contractors that those opposite contracted. It will go into the security arrangements that were put in place and left to the opposition when we formed government. It'll go into all of those, Madam Speaker, and it'll go into the conduct of myself and those on this side and our handling of these issues since we took over responsibility for these centres, where we identified there was a $1.2 billion funding black hole for the operation of the offshore processing centres. Now, that's the figure from my EFO. The Shadow Treasurer interjects opposite that it's not the right figure. Maybe has trouble counting, Madam Speaker, but it was a $1.2 billion funding black hole, and that went to issues such as security infrastructure, the size and capacity of the centre. Now, I know those opposite, Madam Speaker, will be concerned about the specifications and arrangements they put in place in Manus Island. The manager of opposition business once boasted that he could build a 10,000-man camp on Manus Island. And I just shudder to think how something like that could have been run safely at Manus Island. But, Madam Speaker, on this side of the House, and as Minister, we took steps early in September to commission a force protection assessment review of security arrangements on Manus Island, and it listed a long list of things that needed to be conducted and performed, and we have been implementing them now over several months, Madam Speaker. So I look forward to the review.
Has the Minister concluded his answer? The Minister has concluded his answer. The member for Chifley is warned. And I call the honourable member for Hindmarsh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment. I refer the Minister to the statement of the Managing Director of Adelaide Brighton, Mr Mark Chellew, that, and I quote, "The removal of the carbon tax by 1 July 2014 could provide an after-tax benefit of around $2 million compared to 2013. However, there is political uncertainty around the repeal process. What is the political uncertainty Mr Chellew refers to, and how could that be removed?"
I call the Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I note that the member for Hindmarsh asks about political uncertainty, and he asks where the political uncertainty is. Well, the political uncertainty has turned its back on the Australian people. The political uncertainty is sitting in that seat, and the political uncertainty caused by the Leader of the Opposition is an industrial go-slow in the Senate. The Leader of the Opposition has called his senators out on an industrial go-slow. Our senators are ready to vote. They're ready to repeal the carbon tax. They are ready to get on with the business of giving Australians lower electricity prices. But since December, we have had an industrial go-slow in the Senate. This is a throwback to the 50s from a throwback to the 50s. Right now, the Leader of the Opposition, if he wants to be a very modern man, can do something very simple, and that's send his senators back to work, to get them back to the job so as they actually vote on legislation. Because the member for Hindmarsh asks about the costs of the carbon tax, and as the Prime Minister says, the Clean Energy Regulator only a week ago confirmed a multi-billion-dollar hit in the first year, a $4.1 billion hit to electricity bills. I just want to repeat that, $4.1 billion of electricity bills, whilst this Leader of the Opposition sits there with his arms crossed and his senators on strike. But more than that, it's $1.1 billion on manufacturing alone. So at the very moment that the Leader of the Opposition feigns this concern with the jobs of manufacturing workers, he is standing in the way of a $1.1 billion tax relief by removal of the carbon tax for Australia's manufacturing firms and Australia's manufacturing workers. Adelaide Brighton has a gross carbon tax of $62 million, Boral Cement $41 million, Cement Australia $53 million. And what does the cement industry say? The Cement Industry Federation and the National Lime Association of Australia, quote, support the carbon tax repeal legislation and request that the Australian Parliament pass the bills well in advance of July 2014. Well, whilst you're sitting on your hands, we've issued a ministerial determination to axe the carbon tax auctions before the 30th of June. This is your chance, I say to the opposition, to stand up and allow those auctions to be repealed. The determination is in place, the auctions are off, and only a disallowance formed by a reunited Greens and Labor alliance can get in the way of them. So we say to you, get out of the way and let us repeal the carbon tax.
I call the honourable member for Corio.
Never met a cement worker in his life.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. In the minister's previous answer, the minister has said he first received information on Tuesday questioning the precise location of Mr Barati's death. So why did the minister not release his correction to the media until Saturday night at 8:44 p.m?
I call the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Let me read to the opposition spokesperson exactly what I said on the Tuesday afternoon. I'm not going to make assumptions until I have further information on that, referring to the details of what had occurred to the deceased. Where physically this took place, based on the information I have received this afternoon, that is a matter where there are some conflicting reports. A journalist then asked, what are the conflicting reports? And I say, well, the reports are conflicting on where the individual man might have been at the time. That is the report, Madam Speaker, I gave on the Tuesday afternoon, immediately reporting in the press conference that there were conflicting reports about the nature of that incident and where the individual might have been when those incidents occurred. And over the balance of the week, I sought to have those conflicting reports resolved, firstly by sending the Deputy Secretary, secondly by sending General Campbell, and when General Campbell had returned and I had received further advice on the Saturday about these incidents, then I produced the information. Now, those opposite asked about what time, and in particular the Manager of Opposition Business, Madam Speaker, and I asked the Manager of Opposition Business, how long did it take him after the Nauru Processing Centre burnt to the ground to announce— now you get up, don't you? I've got you to your feet now.
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Madam Speaker, there are
on a point of order.
Yeah, on a point of order. There are no end of opportunities in this House for political point scoring.
This is not a point
We
of
are
order.
dealing with an issue where a man—
The manager will resume his seat. Resume your seat. I call the Minister for
Madam Speaker, I have been asked about what time, and I'm simply making reference to the previous practice of past governments. And I note that the Manager of Opposition Business, when he was Minister for Immigration, it took him a full week to front the Australian people to announce the review in relation to the Nauru Processing Centre that burnt down on his watch. It was a meltdown on your watch.
The Manager of Opposition Business, and it better be a point of order this time.
On direct relevance, this cannot possibly be directly relevant to that question.
Has the Minister concluded his answer? The Minister's concluded his answer. I call the member for Barton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
They'll be quiet. The member for Barton can begin again.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Will the Minister update the House on her recent official visit to Fiji and the government's approach to Fiji?
I call the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member for Barton for his question, and I recognise the number of Fijians living in his electorate, as well as the number of Fijians living in Australia. And I'm delighted to be able to inform the House that on the weekend of the 14th and 15th of February, I visited Fiji as part of the Ministerial Contact Group of the Pacific Islands Forum. The 6 ministers in that contact group welcomed the progress that has been made by the Fijian government towards an election to be held by the end of September this year. In particular, we noted the large number of registrations that have occurred. At the last count, it was something like 550,000 voters have been registered out of a population of about 800,000, including registrations of Fijians living in Australia, the US and elsewhere. We also noted that independent electoral commissioners have been appointed, and we were pleased to see that progress towards these elections is being made. We also held meetings with other Fijian ministers to talk about the election preparations. We met with representatives of the other registered political parties, and we met with civil society. There are challenges, including the need for freedom of the press. There are challenges involving putting in place an electoral legal framework for the conduct of the elections, and we urged upon the Fijian authorities to have international observers present. There should not be any doubt in the minds of the international community as to the legitimacy of this election when it is held. I also took the opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Bainimarama. This is the first meeting with an Australian minister since 2008. And in accordance with the commitment that we took to the Australian people at the last election, we believe it is time for there to be a new and constructive phase in our relationship with Fiji. And I outlined to the Prime Minister our plan for deeper engagement, because Australia is the largest source of investment for Fiji. We are the largest source of overseas development assistance. We are the largest source of tourists to Fiji. So we believe it is time to rebuild the political ties, including review the travel sanctions. And in accordance with our election commitment, we have a plan for deeper engagement, and that will include public sector exchanges, it will include defence exchanges and greater trade and investment with Fiji. The business community, the Australian business community, certainly welcomes the change of foreign policy under this government, and given the deep affection that the Australian people have for the people of Fiji and the affection that the people of Fiji have with Australia, I am proud that this government has been able to change the direction of our foreign policy and work towards embracing Fiji as it leads into an election by the end of September this year.
I call the honourable member for Corio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Minister, who is the person on Manus Island in charge of the detention facility? Prior to the death of Mr Reza Barati, how often did the minister speak to that person? When did the minister first speak to that person after the death of Mr Barati? And how often has the minister spoken to that person since?
I call the Honourable Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
The Operations Manager, Madam Speaker, is an appointee of the Chief Migration Officer of the Papua New Guinean Government, Mr Rabura. I first met the Operations Manager when I visited the centre when I was in opposition, and I met him personally when I was there and visiting that centre in September of last year. And on a regular basis, my officers in my department regularly engage with that Operations Manager, and I maintain that contract through the department, as I do with Mr Rabura. The member raises an important question about the jurisdictional issues regarding this centre. This centre is run by the Government of Papua New Guinea. The Australian Government supports the Government of Papua New Guinea in running that centre through the arrangements which were established under the former government, and we work within those arrangements.
I call the honourable member for Boothby.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education, representing the Minister for Employment. Will the Minister inform the House what funds the Health Services Union, a registered organisation under the Fair Works Registered Organisations Act 2009, provided to a political party from 2007? How does that compare with the funds found to have been taken from that union's members by its National Secretary, the former member for Dobell?
I call the Honourable Minister for Education, representing the Minister for Employment.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I can inform the member for Boothby about the questions to which he's put to me. The first question was how much the Health Services Union, a registered organisation under the Act, provided to a political party from 2007. And I can tell the House that the Health Services Union gave $1.2 million to the Australian Labor Party. $1.198 million was donated to the Australian Labor Party from 2007 to last year. I can also tell the House, Madam Speaker, that the Fair Work Commission found that $267,721 of Health Service Union members' money was used in the Dobell campaign to elect Craig Thompson, the former member for Dobell. So $1.2 million went from the Health Services Union to the Australian Labor Party. $267,000 was found by the Fair Work Commission to have been used of Health Service Union money to elect the member for Dobell. I can also tell the House, Madam Speaker, that the Labor Party paid $350,000 of legal fees for the member for Dobell prior to the last election in order to maintain his vote in the parliament, which Senator Dastyari admitted was paid in order to make sure that he remained in the House and they could therefore rely on his vote. So here's an important test for the Leader of the Opposition, Madam Speaker, because he's failed the test on the Registered Organisations Commission, he's failed the test on the Australian Building and Construction Commission, he's failed the test on the Royal Commission into union corruption. But this is an important test. If it was good enough for the Labor Party to use their members' funds to fund the legal defence of Craig Thompson, the former member for Dobell, will the Labor Party pay back the $267,000 to the Health Services Union members that was taken by the former member for Dobell to use in his campaign to be elected illegally, Madam Speaker? This is the test for the Leader of the Opposition. If he really stands on the side of workers, he would direct the Labor Party National Office to repay $267,000 of amongst the poorest workers in the economy back to those members who faithfully handed over their membership dues to their union bosses. He has to show, is he on the side of the worker or is he on the side of dodgy union officials? Can he rise above his background, or will he continue to be a union official supporting union officials running a protection racket for a protection racket? This is his latest test, and I hope that he will announce today that he will pass at least that test.
I call the honourable member for Ballarat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to the conflict of interest involving Senator Nash's former Chief of Staff and to the statement by the Prime Minister's own department at Senate estimates that the Prime Minister approves all personal staff appointments. Did the Prime Minister know of the conflict of interest when this appointment was made, and if so, why was no action taken?
I call the honourable Prime Minister.
Well, the short answer, Madam Speaker, is that certain requirements were put on the staffer in question. My understanding is that he failed to adhere to those requirements. When it became obvious, the staffer in question resigned, and the matter is now at an end.
I call the honourable member for Braddon.
Go for it, mate.
My question, Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Speaker, is to the Assistant Minister for Education. I refer the Minister to this morning's report that shows 1 in 5 young people aged 15 to 24 in West and North West Tasmania, my electorate, are without a job. Will the Minister inform the House what the government is doing to help connect school students to a real job in electorates such as Braddon?
I call the honourable Assistant Minister for Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to take a question from the member for Braddon. Last Friday I was in Burnie and Devonport with the member for Braddon. We visited 2 chambers of commerce. It is indeed an appalling statistic that 20% of young people in the north and northwest of Tasmania are without a job. It was clear to me that the job-destroying carbon tax and the job-destroying Tasmanian Labor government have left these young people without a meaningful pathway from school to work. The cost of doing business in this part of Tasmania is just too high. Now, Madam Speaker, these jobs should exist. Jobs on the farm, in the factory, in forestry, in mining, in agriculture, in aquaculture, and they don't. Last week I also held a roundtable with the states and territories to revisit and rewrite the National Framework for Vocational Education in Schools. This was last created in 2001 by the previous coalition government. The Labor government, I think, had 5 ministers for skills, which shows their lack of commitment to the trades, training and vocational education. Labor spent a lot of time talking about higher education and tertiary education, but instinctively their approach was, if you haven't made it to university, you haven't made it at all. Our approach, Madam Speaker, is very much focused on the young people that I met in Tasmania with the member for Braddon and on a first-class pathway from school to work. Our approach will have industry at the table. We want to elevate the status of the trades. We understand the importance for every young person to find that pathway. It's interesting that there are a lot of people doing vocational ed in schools, but only 9% of the 40% are in a school-based apprenticeship. That needs to increase. We need to have a job leading. We need to have school leading to work. Our approach starts with local schools talking to local industry about local skills shortages. And we look forward to working with the members for Braddon, Bass and Lyons, participating in our economic growth plan for Tasmania, jobs for young people, real jobs in the real economy.
I call the honourable member for Ballarat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to the Prime Minister's previous answer where he has admitted that he was aware of the conflict of interest prior to the appointment of Senator Nash's Chief of Staff.
I will the question out of order if you insist on putting it in those terms.
Sure. My question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to the Prime Minister's previous answer. What were the arrangements required by his office at the appointment of Senator Nash's Chief of Staff, and what actions did he take in ensuring that they were adhered to prior to the Minister making any decisions in her portfolio area that related to the conflict of interest?
Before I call the Prime Minister, I would advise the member that it is going very close to being out of order in accordance with Standing Order 98. This is not a matter of public affairs, and to question whether— In terms of the standing order, the member for Isaacs will desist or remove himself. In terms of the standing order, a member may orally ask a question without notice. A minister can only be questioned on the following matters for which he is responsible or officially connected. Now, it's going very close to the question. However, I will allow the question to stand, and I will call the Prime Minister.
Just before you do,
I call the Leader of Government Business. There will be silence on my left.
Madam Speaker, during your explanation to the chamber as to why you were going to allow the question to stand, the member for Isaacs, I think, very rudely reflected on the chair, and I would ask him to withdraw his very rude reflection on the chair. When you were in the middle of your presentation, he shouted, "You are joking," which is a reflection on the Speaker's position, and I would ask him to withdraw it.
The member for Isaacs. Thank you. I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And for the benefit of the Shadow Minister opposite, the gentleman in question was required to divest himself of an interest in his wife's business. My understanding is that he was dilatory in doing that. When that became apparent, he resigned. That's as it should be. That's as it should be. And I would simply make this point that when people on this side of the Parliament have failed to act by the highest standards of propriety and decency, they go. Simple as that. They go, and he's gone.
I call the honourable member for Longman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Will the Minister inform the House how many days since the last illegal boat arrived? what factors have contributed to that success?
I call the Honourable Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Longman for his question. It's not a question those opposite tend to ask me in this place, Madam Speaker. On that side of the House, they have no real interest, it would seem, in how long it has been since there's been a successful people smuggling venture to make it to Australia. And I can inform the House that it's 67 days. That's how many days it is. Now, 67 days as of today, 64 last Friday, and the reason I say that, Madam Speaker, is because we have not had a consecutive period where there has been no successful venture like this until before the previous government got rid of the policies that worked under the Howard government. The measures that we have put in place, Madam Speaker, are working and they are stopping the boats. And the lead measure in those matters, Madam Speaker, is what we're doing at sea. It's what we're doing at sea, and I'm not going to rely only on our own experience in this, Madam Speaker, but I'm going to make reference to Gillian Triggs. I'm going to make reference to Gillian Triggs, who said today that I suspect that the real cause of the capacity to save lives had been the stopping of the boats in the physical sense. And we know what she's referring to, Madam Speaker. She's referring to our policy to intercept vessels that seek to illegally enter our waters and for us to remove them. This has been the watershed policy, Madam Speaker, that has been responsible for the success we have seen over the last 67 days. Those opposite, Madam Speaker, like to refer to offshore processing, but those opposite had to be dragged kicking and screaming to offshore processing, Madam Speaker, and now they talk about it as the cornerstone of their policies. It was the only stone, Madam Speaker, they had in their policies, the only stone they had, and they had to be forced to put it back in place. Now, that measure remains important, Madam Speaker. It remains important. It is a backstop measure for any potential measure that may happen to get through. But for 67 days, Madam Speaker, that hasn't happened. And the other measure, Madam Speaker, relates to temporary protection visas for those of the more than 30,000 the opposition now who in government left behind to this government. And those opposites still to this day are seeking to frustrate the mandate of this government to remove the possibility of permanent visas for people who have come to this country illegally by boat. They betray themselves, Madam Speaker, but this government is not going to be intimidated to walk away from our policies. We're not going to be intimidated by the weakness of the Greens or the double-mindedness and hypocrisy of the Labor Party. We're not going to be intimidated by any violence that occurs in any centres anywhere or at sea. Our policies are working, Madam Speaker. They are stopping the boats, and our resolve is absolute.
I call the honourable member for Ballarat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and my question is to the Prime Minister, and I refer to his previous answer. I refer to the statement of ministerial standards that requires ministers to ensure their decisions are unaffected by bias or conflicts of interest and that they not mislead the public or the parliament. Given that the Prime Minister is in charge of the ministerial standards of the executive, why has the Prime Minister taken no action in relation to Senator Nash's clear breach of these standards?
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate that members opposite are desperate to find some moral fault with members on this side of the House. I appreciate that. I appreciate the embarrassment in certain important respects of members opposite when it comes to ethical standards just at this present time. But, Madam Speaker, let me make this point. The minister in question has not breached the standards. She's not breached the standards. She gave what she thought was correct information to the Senate at the time, and as soon as she was aware that the information was incorrect, it was in fact corrected to the Senate. And as for the former staffer was required to divest himself of a shareholding. He was dilatory in doing so. As soon as that became apparent, he resigned. The matter is at an end. The right thing has been done by all.
I call the honourable member for. Sorry. I call the honourable member for Ballarat.
Thank you. I seek leave to table the ministerial standards to remind the Prime Minister of what they are.
Is leave granted? Leave is not granted. I call the honourable member for Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Health. I refer the Minister to the Emerald GP Super Clinic in my electorate that was promised more than 3 years ago. It's still not open, still hasn't seen a patient. Will the Minister update the House on how delays of the GP Super Clinic program have affected the provision of health services in Queensland?
I call the honourable Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much to the hard-working member for Flynn. I appreciate his interest in health, and thank you very much for this question. And of course, the GP Super Clinic program was held up by the former Minister for Health, the member for Sydney, former Minister Plibersek, as one of the great programs of the Labor Party, their time in government. And it's worth going back through the GP Super Clinic program to try and trawl through those many successes, and Emerald happens to be amongst those. I'm happy to inform the member for Flynn. Now, like the member for Flynn, I'm a little old-fashioned on these things. I like to see a doctor's surgery, not an open paddock where patients are expected to go to see a GP. It's old-fashioned, I know, and I'd expect that when the taxpayer is contributing $5 million for a vacant paddock and not one patient seen, and yet the former Health Minister trumpeted this as one of Labor's great successes. Well, it's all relative, of course, but it was a $650 million program, the GP so-called Super Clinic program, bearing in mind that they had to borrow that $650 million and bearing in mind that other health needs met this nation, such as the ageing of the population, a doubling of the amount that we were spending on medical services over the course of the last 10 years, the Labor Party was still able to set up 12 new bureaucracies and find $650 million of borrowed money to put into these super clinics for none of that to make any difference to patients. This is the ironic part of it, Madam Speaker. $650 million, and in this particular case, this was promised in August 2010. Now, there's another example which I'd like to point to, and that is the Mount Isa GP Super Clinic. It was promised on the 21st of November 2007. And in actual fact, I've got this glossy press release here, which talks about some money, $2.5 million of borrowed taxpayers' money being put into a super clinic at Mount Isa. Again, never been built. Never been built, not one patient seen. And this Labor Party left this government with $123 billion of accumulated deficits, racing towards debt of $667 billion. And here they were in government, the former minister, the member for Sydney, saying that this was a great program, wasting money hand over fist, not seeing patients, not cutting waiting lists, not investing in the areas that we need to in health. They wasted money across government. They left us with an incredible mess. But we will clean Labor's mess up in health, as we will do in other portfolios. We will get Australia's health system back on track, but we won't do it by wasting taxpayers' money like Labor did with the Super Clinic program.
I call the honourable member for Ballarat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my question is again to the Prime Minister, and I refer to his statement that I'm determined to ensure that as far as the new coalition government in Canberra is concerned, not only is it clean and fair, but it's seen to be clean and fair. Prime Minister, were the actions of the Assistant Minister for Health clean and fair when she removed the Health Star Rating website, a policy decision where her Chief of Staff had a clear conflict of interest? And why won't the Prime Minister require that the website be reinstated immediately?
I call the honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, again, I understand that the Shadow Minister in question is attempting to impugn the ethical standards of this government. I I back the ethical standards of this government absolutely to the hilt against the ethical standards that members opposite showed when they were in government. I do, Madam Speaker. I do. And if the Leader of the Opposition wants to show a little bit of repentance for the standards of members opposite, he might say something about the former member for Dobell. Now, Madam Speaker, to get on to the issues that she raised,
the Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Ballarat on a point of order.
On relevance, it was a particular question about the Health Star rating website and on Senator Nash's.
It was quite clearly a question about ethical behaviour. The Prime Minister has the call.
Now, Madam Speaker, on the Health Star rating, my understanding is that the departmental website was put up before the system was ready to go. That's my understanding. That's the answer that the Minister provided to the Senate. Madam Speaker, let me make this absolutely crystal clear. The Minister has done the right thing, and the former staffer did the right thing by resigning. This is a government which takes ethical standards seriously. This is the government that will always act with decency and integrity.
The member for Wakefield will remove himself under 94A.
The staffer in question was dilatory in complying with an undertaking that he had given. He's now done the right thing and he has resigned. The matter is at an end.
I call the honourable member for Banks.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. What is the government doing to deliver fast broadband to Australian businesses and families who cannot access broadband after 6 years of Labor?
I call the Minister for Communications.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member and well recall the broadband forum we had in his electorate some months ago. Madam Speaker, when the previous government embarked on the National Broadband Network project, it's notorious that they didn't undertake a cost-benefit analysis. But what is perhaps not so well known is that they did not bother to even ask the most fundamental question, which is where is broadband good, where is it okay, and where is there no broadband at all? Because logically, a government that's going to spend taxpayers' money to address broadband deficiencies would want to target the people who have the worst broadband. And our predecessors in government, the Labor Party, had no idea what the answer to that question was. They didn't care because the only thing that informed their rollout was politics. And that is why you saw in marginal seats in Western Sydney the fibre network being rolled out in streets where there was not one but two hybrid fibre coax networks, where the residents could already get a pick of 200 megabit per second services. So what have we done? Well, last Thursday we released the complete broadband availability and quality report and the My Broadband website that drills down to 78,000 local areas across Australia and shows what types of broadband are available and the availability, wireless, HFC, fibre to the premises, ADSL, etc., and what the quality of it is. So it gives an estimate as to what type of speeds people will get. And that shows graphically where broadband is good, and in some places it is very, very good, and it shows where it is really bad. And there are 1.6 million premises in Australia, Madam Speaker, where there is either no broadband at all or broadband with median peak speeds of 4.8 megabits per second or less, which is today unacceptably slow. Now, it would have been a lot easier if the previous government had done this from the start, and as I've said to the House many times, we're not left with a blank sheet of paper but a real mess to clean up with the NBN. But what we are now going to do is to prioritise the worst-served areas so that people with poor broadband get it upgraded sooner. And the recent strategic review of the NBN estimated that underserved areas can be upgraded on average 2 years sooner if they are prioritised in the rollout as we are proposing. Madam Speaker, we are committed to all Australians having access to very fast broadband, sooner, cheaper and more affordably, and only the Coalition can be counted on to get that job done.
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, after that excellent answer, I ask that further questions be put on the notice paper.
You knew he was on board, Malcolm.
Members will remain in their seats. I wish to inform the House that following a competitive selection process, Ms Clarissa Surtees has been appointed as Deputy Clerk of the House. I am sure that members would look forward to working with her in this role, and I might add that she is the first female to hold that position. And in accordance with Resolution 3 of the House of Representatives relating to the registration of members' interests, I have appointed Ms Surtees as Registrar of Members' Interests. I have received advice from the Chief Government Whip nominating a member to be a supplementary member of the Standing Committee on Economics for the purpose of the committee's inquiry into the Reserve Bank Annual Report of 2013. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I ask leave of the House to move a motion for the appointment of a supplementary member to the Standing Committee on Economics.
Is leave granted? Is leave granted? Leave is granted. I move that Mr Smith be appointed a supplementary member of the Standing Committee on Economics for the purpose of the committee's inquiry into the Reserve Bank Annual Report of 2013, and the Minister would move that way.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do move the motion in the terms that you've outlined.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I present the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report number 20 of 2013-14 entitled Management of the Central Movement Alert List, Follow-on Audit, Department of Immigration and Border Protection. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I move that the report be made a parliamentary paper.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Mr Clerk? All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Minister, Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, I have two further motions. The first is that documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings and Hansard. And secondly, I ask leave of the House to move a motion to appoint a member to the Parliamentary Retiring Allowances Trust.
Is leave granted?
Leave is granted.
Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that in accordance with the provisions of the Parliamentary Contributory Superannuation Act 1948, Mr Ruddock be appointed a trustee to serve on the Parliamentary Retiring Allowances Trust.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I have a statement I wish to make to the House. Earlier today, a matter of privilege was raised by the Honourable Member for Dobell. As I said earlier today, the Honourable Member for Dobell raised as a matter of privilege that in a statement to the House on the 21st of May 2012, the former Member for Dobell, Mr Craig Thomson, deliberately misled the House. The Honourable Member for Dobell provided some background to this matter, including that a question of privilege in relation to Mr Thomson had been referred to the Committee of Privileges and Members' Interests in the last Parliament. I note that the chair of the committee of the time, the member for Gellibrand, the Honourable Nicola Roxon, advised the House on the 14th of February 2013 that the committee had suspended its inquiry as the laying of criminal charges against Mr Thomson raised issues in terms of the operation of the Sub Judice Convention. Ms Roxon noted that the inquiry remained live, and at the conclusion of the judicial proceedings, the committee would consider how it would proceed with the inquiry. That inquiry lapsed with the dissolution of the House. The Honourable Member for Dobell also makes reference to findings of guilt in relation to Mr Thomson by the Melbourne Magistrates Court on the 18th of February 2014. Deliberately misleading the House is one of the matters that can be found to be a contempt. As I noted earlier, this matter was referred to the Committee of Privileges and Members' Interests in the last Parliament with unanimous agreement of the House. I have considered the principal information provided by the Honourable Member for Dobell and the background material I have already referred to. In light of the fact that the House has referred this matter to the Committee of Privileges and Members' Interests in the last Parliament, and that the proceedings were suspended, and the findings of guilt by the Melbourne Magistrates Court, I give precedence for this matter to be referred to the Committee of Privileges and Members' Interests. I call the Honourable the Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I move that the following matter be referred to the Committee of Privileges and Members' Interests. Whether in the course of his statement to the House on 21 May 2012 and having regard to the findings of the Melbourne Magistrates Court on the 18th of February 2014 in relation to Mr Thompson, the former member for Dobell, Mr Craig Thompson, deliberately misled the House. And I might ask the clerk to photocopy that and provide it to the Manager of Opposition Business. If I could speak very briefly to the matter before the House, Madam Speaker. I don't wish to traverse all the details of the sordid and tawdry tale that has been the issues surrounding the member for Dobell and the Health Services Union over the last several years. But I think it's perfectly clear that for parliamentary privilege to mean anything, it needs to be protected and enhanced. Members of Parliament have a real opportunity in this place to put things on the record that they might otherwise not be able to put on the record without facing matters of defamation. That also comes with it a very heavy responsibility. In the statement the member for Dobell, the former member for Dobell, made to the House, several members of the public were named by the former member for Dobell, and an extraordinary tale was weaved in that statement, which many members on this side of the House, and I'm sure many members on the other side of the House, now regard as fantastic, given that the former member for Dobell did not dispute the facts in the case in the Melbourne Magistrates Court, only that he had the authority to use Health Services Union members' funds in the way that he used them. This side of the House, and I'm sure the Manager of Opposition Business and the other side of the House, believe that telling the truth in Parliament is an extremely important aspect of the role we play as members of Parliament. Sure, politicians have been accused over the centuries of sometimes gilding the lily and perhaps not being entirely fulsome with all aspects of the truth. But that is a far cry from standing up in the Parliament and making statements which are deliberately misleading, which are lies to the chamber. And it is the role of the Privileges Committee to determine whether that was made in a deliberate way, and if so, to recommend to the Parliament what sanction might apply to the member for Dobell, the former member for Dobell. And in fact, those members who are interested will be able to look back through the precedents of this place and recognise that this has been an issue in the past and the Parliament has acted. But I will leave the deliberations of those matters to the Privileges Committee. That is their purpose. But I simply place on record for the House today that we think deliberately lying to the House is something that the whole Parliament should want to deal with, and deal with very severely if we are not to maintain a reputation as any Parliament of putting the truth ahead of the personal political salvation of one member of Parliament by lying. So I'm glad that you've given precedence to this motion. I have discussed it with the Manager of Opposition Business in the House. I look forward to his remarks, and I hope the Privileges Committee will deal with the issue in speed and also in an entirely non-partisan way in order to protect the reputation of the Parliament.
I call the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Can I join the Leader of the House in expressing agreement with and support for your decision to give precedence for this matter? This matter was referred unanimously to the Privileges Committee in the last Parliament. It had our support then. The motion that is now before the House has but one amendment, which is quite appropriately to incorporate the findings of the Magistrates Court in those deliberations. For that reason, as we supported it in the last Parliament, we support the reference in this Parliament.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Clerk.
Government Business Order of the Day number 2, Governor-General's opening speech, resumption of debate on the proposed address and reply.
The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for
Oxley.
Oxley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to the House to make some remarks as the address and reply. And can I start by saying that it's always an honour to be elected to this parliament, and for me to be re-elected for the 6th time is a huge honour and something that I'm let's say become more aware of for the 6th time. It's being elected the first time in 1998. I do recall really well my campaign. All of the volunteers around me, the Labor Party, all of my supporters, and with a clear intention to work really hard to be a good representative for my community and to fairly, honestly represent their views as best as possible in the parliament, and only having one intention: to do the very best job I could, and to just hope that if I did that, my electorate might give me a second chance to be re-elected for another term in 2001. And obviously, now being 2014, having been re-elected in 2013 is a huge privilege. All election campaigns are hard fought. They're hard fought on all sides. Everybody who runs in an election wants to represent their community, but for a variety of reasons. People have different motivations, different goals, different objectives, different philosophies, different views about what their collective community needs most or prioritise. And for me, it would be no different. I'm very close to my community. I'd like to think I am anyway, and certainly to all its great variety, different cultures, different languages. It's an enormously diverse community, from Vietnamese people in one area to Pacifica people in another, to Indigenous people, through my hometown where I grew up in Inala, right through to lots of old European families, to a whole variety. I think in the collective sort of Western Corridor there's something like over 100 languages, different languages that are spoken, an enormous variety of cultures. And to be a representative for that community is something I feel very proud about. The election day itself was an unusual one, to say the least, but for all the doom and gloom, there were so many positives, so many good things on the day. And I think that opportunity that a community gets to come and cast its judgment, not just on a government and who leads the country, but also who leads them in the parliament at a local level, I think is something that we should all take note of. Like all elections, there are issues which are national, perhaps even sometimes international, but certainly there are many issues which are local. And in my electorate of Oxley, in the Western Corridor of Brisbane and Ipswich, my constituents were very concerned about what an Abbott government might mean for them, and not in a positive way. Having already experienced a Campbell-Newman government at a state level, they were very concerned and very frightened, some people, about where they might end up, what sort of cuts they might get. The mood and the talk was about what they might lose, not what they might gain. Locally, people told me they knew that Labor had worked very hard, and yes, there was a price to be paid for us, and I'm the first to acknowledge it, for a range of issues that we had in the previous parliament. But still, my electorate were very convinced that Labor, under any circumstances, could still deliver for them a better outcome. And whether that revolved around infrastructure delivery, such things as the Ipswich motorway, whether it was local roads, whether it was the work that we'd done in schools, building the education revolution, not just providing infrastructure but providing a whole different sense about the way that every child going to school would get a hand up, not a hand out, and that there'd be a real positive change in the way that education would be delivered. And it always does remind me, though, and I'm sure it's the case for all members in this place, I haven't yet been to a school where they didn't want the school hall, or they didn't want the classroom, or they didn't want the science lab, or they didn't want the extra investment. If somebody here in this place can come up forward and say, I found one, I found a school that rejects the investment of cash, that rejects a new school hall or classroom, please come forward and let me know, because I'm yet to come across one anywhere, let alone in my electorate. It was money well spent, and it did. And I want to spend just a couple of seconds but remind people it wasn't it was a two-pronged thing that we had to do. Coming out of a global financial crisis, a good government needs to respond. We wanted to not just protect jobs and protect the economy and make sure that families still had an ability to pay their mortgage, but we wanted to invest in schools at the same time. And that'll be something that'll be with us for the next 30 years. There's sort of legacy infrastructure projects that you can always turn to every time you go to a school and there's a meeting, whether it's induction of leaders that we would have seen just recently in the last few weeks. You always turn up in the school hall that Labor built. And I've got enormous pleasure but pride in being able to go to some of my older schools, which, to be honest with you, a little bit run down in some parts where no one had spent any money there, state or federal, for 30, 40 or even longer years, and to see the one shining example of an investment in that school, in that community, was something that Labor did, filled me with a lot of pride. Yes, true, at the same time, we didn't get quite all the kudos that we possibly could have, but sometimes you do things because they're right, not just because you're going to get thanked for it afterwards. There was a lot of other particular issues in the electorate, and something also for me that was very personal but very important is that if you do a good job in your community and you stick with people, you work with people from different communities, regardless of where they might politically line up, they do remember that you did something really good for them. And they said to me, different people in different communities said to me, we don't forget our friends and we don't forget when you stood up for us. And that's probably a lesson that all members in this place could ponder over, perhaps. So I'm enormously proud of what my office, because it's certainly not just me, I'm just but one person, all of my staff, my office, all of our volunteers, all the people that lend a hand, help, do things in the community, turn up to events, make things happen, assist in things happening, all of those things that we do over a long period of time, that it actually means something, that it's actually valued. And for me, after so many years in Parliament, they're the things now that I look back on and say, well, they're the things that are worthwhile. They're the things that are doing, regardless of the politics, regardless of the way that people vote. Not only did we do that, but in my electorate, in a growing and developing part of Queensland in the Western Corridor, there's a lot of infrastructure to be built, but there's a lot of development to go on. People are building lives, families are growing. Not only do they need schools, but they need places to recreate, parks, they need amenity, they need those things. And while traditionally that's been the purvey of local government and other things, there is a case to be made that the federal government can get involved, and we did. In government, we added value to a whole range of communities where a small bit of funding, for example in Robel Domain at Springfield Lakes, where a small bit of funding facilitated a much larger project going ahead. And they're the sort of things that, again, very proud that Labor did, right through whether it's black spot intersection upgrades, of which I was the Queensland chair of the committee. And by announcing it here today, I'm sure I'll be removed as chair when somebody discovers that a Labor member still chairs that committee, and perhaps I should be replaced by a Liberal member. We'll see how long it is before someone tweaks to that. Sure, that'll be in the next 2 minutes. Right through to the work we did in the National Broadband Network and rolling out, delivered, forget about all the claptrap you hear in this place about the politics of it all, but everywhere that got it actually delivered, connected on, let me tell you, I've never seen happier people who really understand it, whether it was some retirees and pensioners that I visited that had their home connected, their ability to talk to family or to just be a part of the bigger world through that giant portal, that huge window that gives them an opportunity to the rest of the world. And some of our older people are the most skilled at getting on the internet. They have a little bit more spare time in their retirement and they can see what's happening in the world, right through to small businesses, home businesses, micro businesses. I've never seen such a rush of people knocking my door down and saying, when are we next? When are we getting the NBN? Well, it was a big program. You can't roll out an 8-year program in 8 weeks, but it's worthwhile. Again, it's the sort of heavy lifting that Labor governments do that I'm proud that we did as a government. Heavy lifting that for most governments is just too hard, it's just too difficult. You can't think that far ahead. 8 years, my God, somebody might criticise us for not getting it all done in 8 weeks. Well, the reality is we started it, and no matter what this new government does, it will continue. It might look a bit different, but it's the work that we did, the heavy lifting that we did in terms of a national broadband network, that will guarantee that Australia has a future in terms of connecting to itself, schools, education, health and medical, or to the rest of the world that will guarantee small business an opportunity to do the things that they have to do in the modern world. The modern world was last century, by the way, just in case the mob on the other side aren't quite sure about where the modern world sits. And there's another particular piece of work and funding that we did, again, which I think, well, I'm enormously proud of, but I think we delivered in spades. And we committed an amount of funding for the Brisbane Lions, the Australian Football League, to relocate its headquarters in Brisbane and field to Springfield Lakes. And this was an enormous move for the Lions. It came with a lot of infrastructure, a lot of jobs. And we did that a few days, as I understand, if not a week before caretaker mode, quite legitimately, which guaranteed that that organisation and football in the Western Corridor would thrive. My understanding today is that that funding's been withdrawn, and I know this will create an enormous disappointment across my community, but across all fans of football. This sort of issue should be above politics. The sort of infrastructure delivery it gave was beyond reproach, was value for money, and I think really disappointing. Can I also just turn to, and I've mentioned a whole range of my communities, but I want to single out the Vietnamese community in my electorate and give special thanks to Phung and Duc. And I won't go into a whole heap of other names, otherwise I'll be here for a long time. And, but I do want to make special mention of both those two people for being such good, honest, hard workers in their own community, let alone in supporting me and my efforts to represent them in this parliament. I also want to thank Tin, who's our Vietnamese-speaking volunteer, who comes in to help Vietnamese constituents with their issues and provides for free an invaluable service. And also wanted to mention members of the Pacific Island community who are genuine hard-working people who have created a new life in Australia, most of whom have got New Zealand citizenship and come here over many years in a variety of means. They come here to seek new opportunities, not unlike everybody else who's come to Australia, not unlike all of us at some point in time, where people have come here because they want a bigger, better opportunity for their families. And I'm really proud of the fact that they do that. There are a number of issues that I was working on in the previous parliament and in government to make sure that they get a fair opportunity at educating their kids and the same sort of benefits that Australians might get, even though there are some conditions around their residence here in Australia as not full Australian citizens. But I think there's a lot that this parliament could look at in terms of making their life a bit better, particularly for their kids who aspire to a higher education level and can contribute so much to our community. I did mention that Oxley is right dead smack in the middle of the Western Corridor, right between two great cities of Brisbane and Ipswich, and is one of the fastest growing corridors in the country. People go there because it's a great place to live. It's where I call home, and it's just thriving with new opportunities, new jobs, innovators. There's so much potential there just bubbling out of the surface, but you need to support that. You need to support it through assistance at government levels to do the things that developers can't do. You can't build a railway line as a developer, but a state government can invest in people and invest in communities. A federal government can invest in massive infrastructure for nationally significant parks that in 50 years' time will be looked back on and said, my God, the people who thought this up must have been real forward thinkers. Well, they're the people of today. And sometimes you've just got to do that. It's a bit like building the Story Bridge in Brisbane back when it was built in the 20s. No one could have imagined back then, in the sort of horse and cart days, that you'd need 8 lanes or 10. They must have all been saying, you're overcooking it, you're spending too much. But we look back today and we say, gee, if only they could have added just an extra 2 lanes would have been good. So there's lots, I think, of really good argument to be made around supporting and developing, whether it's infill areas like Richlands or Inala, or right through, from parts of my electorate at Goodna and Ipswich, right through to Springfield, of course, and all my centenary suburbs, which thrive in the western part of Brisbane as well. Our schools are booming. We've got record achievements at some of my schools, and some of my schools in the most difficult of areas. Glenala High in Inala, many, many years ago, was probably regarded as, I'll just say, probably one of the worst schools in the country. Had a high Pacifica and Indigenous community, and through the persistence of a number of school leaders and principals, they've now become an exemplar school right across the country, have achieved some of the best results I've ever seen in a school coming from its base, having now something like 90 95% plus retention rates in Year 12, having 84% of Year 12s actually get an OP of somewhere between a 1 and a 15, and incredible results because people believe in that school, believe in the kids, believe in the community. It's amazing what you can do. It's not just about infrastructure and money, it's about leadership. And I always want to, at every opportunity, say a huge thank you and congratulations to Glenalla State High for the incredible work they've done to produce some of the best kids in the region. But it's not all good news. There is some bad news, unfortunately, and particularly if you're a small business in my area or right across the country. When Labor was in government, some of you might find this a bit difficult, but we actually were the best friend of business and the best friend of small business because we invested some real money in supporting them, not only through the global financial crisis, but in aspects of building their business, starting their business. National names, business names registration was an incredible step forward into the modern world, taking 7 disparate databases across the country, some which were just paper, putting it all on the net, putting all those databases together. It used to cost $1,000 to register your business across the country. Now it's something like $70. And you can do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also invested a huge amount of money in the instant asset tax write-off, not only in the assets, but also in direct investment through pooled depreciation, through motor vehicle. All up, the direct investment that we made in business and small business was close to $5 billion. It's a lot of money. But you would spend a lot of money on small business if you believed in them. Well, the first thing the Abbott government did when it came to government was take all of that money away, whether it was through a whole variety of things, whether instant asset tax write-off, whether it was direct assistance, and there's more to come. But that's a $5 billion hit to small business. And they won't quite feel it just yet. They're just twigging onto the fact that all this assistance is gone. They've defunded bodies that used to assist, helplines, websites that were really well used. Small business actually does use the facilities that we provided them, not only the tax incentives and the direct cash incentives as well. Where they invested, we invested with them. We were there for small business. This government says they're the best friend of small business. We'll see when the money's on the table who really is their best friend. And that, for me, is something that's really important. There's a lot to be said in terms of all the things that have changed since this new government in the short 5 and a bit months. I was particularly close to the future financial advice reforms, and we did that very clearly. That was a difficult period in time. Global financial crisis, the storm collapse trio, lots of mums and dads who'd worked their whole life to save for themselves for independence and retirement, losing it all. Something had to be done, and again, we stepped up and we did it. It took a lot of years, a lot of consultation, a lot of work, but we came up with, I think, what is a really good model, the FOFA reforms. This government now takes those reforms and says it'll make some technical amendments and some minor changes. Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is the changes that are being made will rip at the guts of FOFA, will leave nothing left, no best interest, no transparency, no disclosure, the reintroduction of bank commissions and fees, and we'll see over a period of time some clear winners. Those clear winners won't be consumers. Consumer protection will be gone, and what we'll see is consumers paying an enormous amounts in fees and losing the sort of protections that Labor put in place. But I want to reserve the last 2 minutes of my time to talk about jobs and talk about the important work that Labor did in supporting jobs, not just through the global financial crisis. We actually were there when 1 million jobs were created during the worst global recession in the world. We kept pace above anyone else doing. Now, the Abbott government have promised to create, although they said governments never create jobs, but they promised to create 1 million jobs in 5 years. Well, the little ticker is counting. Yeah, it's counting. It's ticking away. But unfortunately for them, it's heading south really, really badly. Not only do they go Toyota and Holden to go, they're not interested in jobs and a plan for saving jobs. In fact, they're doing everything they can to say, look, we're not interested in that, we don't want to participate in that. And they might have some arguments around some of the things about industry welfare and all the rest of it, so let's hear those, let's have a debate about those. But what we're saying is, where's your plan in terms of creating jobs? What are you actually going to do to turn up in this place just once and just say, well, this is our jobs creation plan. This is what we plan for communities in Geelong or South Australia or other places where they're actually being hit by the closures. We all understand the high Australian dollar. We understand the difficulties of manufacturing. But to just shut the gate, shut the door and leave those people, those workers, those families, those communities with no hope, I think is wrong. When it always comes to who do you stand for, who do you stand up for, how will you be counted when things... when we were in government, Labor took the difficult decisions. We always stood up for communities, we stood up for people, we stood up for families, whatever the cost. Because you need to do that as a government. You need to support your country and your national interest. And when it comes to a choice here, this coalition government opposite are prepared to just cut people loose. And cutting people loose means that in Australia now, for the first time in a decade, in more than 10 years, we're seeing a 6% unemployment rate, and that's not good enough.
Time has expired. The question is that the address be agreed to. I call the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. There is no greater privilege than that which is bestowed upon us when we are elected to this place. But it is a greater honour to be returned to this place by the electors of Hasluck. I would like to thank the people in Hasluck electorate who supported my re-election as their federal representative for another term. It's an honour and a privilege to continue serving the people in my electorate, and I look forward to another 3 years and hopefully a future that is a little bit longer. I remain absolutely committed to working on their behalf, both within the electorate and here in Canberra. I'm equally pleased to be joined in the Parliament by the new members who are outstanding West Australians, and it is great to have them join the WA team in the federal parliament, where their contribution will be of immense value to the nation. And I'd like to acknowledge Mr Christian Porter, the member for Pearce and the former Treasurer in the Barnett government, Mr Melissa Price, the member for Durack, Mr Ian Goodenough, the member for Moore, and Mr Rick Wilson, the member for O'Connor. All have been elected to this place for the first time. The experiences that they went through reminds me of my first day that I walked through the doors into the House of Reps. And it was an emotional feeling of elation, but also the fact that you could contribute to the debates in this House that improved and worked for the benefits of greater Australian society and the people that we represent, as well as the broader community. You don't win and retain your seat on your own. And I'd like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the people who assisted me during the campaign. There were many, particularly my staff members of the Liberal Party and many supporters who I have thanked privately. I want to congratulate the Prime Minister Tony Abbott on the magnificent campaign that he ran and thank him for visiting my electorate to announce the Swan Valley Bypass, which is better known as the Perth to Darwin Highway. I just want to make special mention of a number of people who gave so much of their time during the campaign and on the days of the election. They were there always, long hours, the hard yards. Firstly, my family, my wife Anna, and my two sons, Brendan and Aaron. My staff, Jared Lomas, Amanda Templeton, Jill Bonanno, Morgan Ralph, Chloe Lim, Carlia Dillon and David Lavelle. To my campaign team, Barry McKinnon, Linda Reynolds, Heather Gilmore, Peter Stewart, Jamie Edwards, Daniel Blaine, Graham Harris, Ray Giannoli, Deirdre Wilmot, Terry O'Connor, Wayne McIntosh, Bill Munro, Peter Abetz, Nathan Morton, Joanne Price, Liam Staltari, Hanks Louise and Merle Byrne. In particular, I also want to acknowledge Damien Cole, Jenny Tanner and Emma Tanner for the work that they did on election night when we came together. The Honourable Julie Bishop MP for all of her support, Ben Morton and Menzies House, and all the volunteers, or the Sea of Blue and the polling day workers, young Liberals and Liberal students. I'd like to make a few points on the election in Hasluck in Western Australia and on the election generally. I'm proud to have been re-elected, and I'm also proud to have taken the seat from a margin of 0.58 to one that is now 4.3%, and on being the first member to win the seat back-to-back. I want to congratulate the 6 candidates who nominated for and contested the election for the seat of Hasluck. That is the beauty of our democracy. Adrian Evans, Deputy Secretary of the Maritime Union of Western Australia, was a formidable opponent, and he was determined to win the seat of Hasluck. I had immense respect for Adrian, not only as an opponent, but as a person who was an excellent candidate, a family man and respectful of his opponents. Adrian really hit the trail hard with a well-financed campaign, and at times it was alleged that my opponent had a war chest of $1.4 million to fight with. To me, it doesn't matter about the quantum of funding, but what is more important are the concerns which are important to the people and families of Hasluck. I'll continue to emphasise the importance of building stronger local communities within my electorate. I also want to reflect on some memorable election moments, from the launch at the Advent Park in Maida Vale in July to others that included Prime Minister Tony Abbott's visit to announce the Swan Valley bypass funding, which we had been fighting for, the Honourable Christopher Pyne assisting to mark the 3rd anniversary of my election to the Australian Parliament, the former Prime Minister John Howard at the Midland Gate Shopping Centre, who was mobbed like a rock star, young people wanting selfies, people who turned and said, "We need you back, we want strong leadership." They enjoyed his company and they enjoyed the interaction. Midland markets every Sunday morning, 5 a.m. to set up. Kalamunda markets also on a Sunday morning. I also want to acknowledge Margie Abbott for spending a half day in the electorate engaging with constituents and spending the time to meet with people and to interact and seek their views in the way that they were progressing their lives and some of the challenges that they were facing. Bronwyn Bishop, newly elected Speaker, spent a whole day in the electorate and engaged with seniors at a number of forums in which she answered some of the tough questions. To the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull, who met with constituents about the Coalition's vision for the NBN and the commitments that he would undertake if we were elected. The number of people from the electorate that wanted to assist with campaign signs in the front yard, help out on polling day and assist wherever there was a need to help me be re-elected. And to Brian on the Helena Valley booth, who had a heart attack a week before the polling day and still rocked up to help out against advice. Thank you for that dedication. I want to respond to particular matters acknowledged in the address in reply to the speech of Her Excellency, the Honourable Quentin Bryce, AC, CVO, Governor-General, on the occasion of the opening of the 44th Commonwealth Parliament. I want to turn to Her Excellency's reflections on key matters that are important for the families and constituents of Hasluck. In her opening address, she said on September the 7th, the Australian people voted for a government that said it would repeal the carbon tax, establish a commission of audit and improve the budget, strengthen border protection and build roads for the 21st century. I'm proud to be a member of a government which is committed to developing a strong, prosperous economy built on prudent economic management, a government which will focus on more productive and diverse economy that will guarantee Australia's future prosperity by building on our national strengths, a government that will work to deliver more jobs and more opportunities so there is less pressure on the families of Hasluck, enables more Australians to get ahead. It is a vision of a dynamic, confident Australia where we can all individually and collectively pursue our hopes and dreams. Businesses within Hasluck will ultimately benefit through growing a strong economy and creating the best conditions for more jobs, and families will benefit from the growth in all parts of the economy, in manufacturing, agriculture, education, research, services and mining. As the economies of Asia continue to expand, demand for Australian resources and other exports will remain strong, and there will be a new demand for Australian education and research and expertise in advanced services, manufacturing and agricultural products. And there are already businesses within my electorate that are benefiting from that focus, and they are creating the opportunities that build their companies for a strong position within the economy of Western Australia. This creates opportunities for the medium and small businesses within Hasluck and indeed for all Australian companies. I will remain a strong advocate for the people of Hasluck and will work to ensure that the National Disability Insurance Scheme becomes a reality for Australians with disability and their carers, and particularly for those who live within the electorate. I also welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to provide $200 million to help Australian scientists find a cure for dementia and $35 million to help find a cure for type 1 diabetes. Within the electorate of Hasluck, there are 8,070 Australians who experience diabetes, and this research will help assist their quality of life. Equally, I welcome the commitment to provide fairness in superannuation pensions to our veterans and the Defence Force retirement benefit and the Defence Force retirement and death benefit superannuation pensions, which will be more generously indexed from 1 July next year. This will be welcome news to those who live within my electorate. I want to ensure that businesses, families and individuals who live and work in the seat of Hasluck are an integral part of a more productive and diverse economy that will guarantee Australia's future prosperity. And I'm pleased that following the election commitments that we secured the following: $500,000 for CCTV in the City of Swan, Green Army commitments through the electorate for the Friends of Mary Carroll Wetland, the Tom Bateman Reserve, Brixton Street Wetland, Blackadder Creek, Wattle Grove Open Space and Kings Meadow Reserve. Trees for the Men of the Trees in the Shire of Kalamunda. $615 million for the Swan Valley Bypass, originally known as the Perth-Darwin Highway Stage 1. The commitment to the completion of the Gateway WA project around the Perth Airport. I've now been on this journey for 3.5 years, and I thank those who've been on the journey the entire way, and that includes all those that I associate with. The local agenda of issues that are matters that are close to my heart, and it is my intention to act on the pursuing priorities for my electorate. Building a stronger local community that brings together families and people to value, to contribute, to protect and look after each other. Education, and in the gallery today I have 2 young people who are part of the Hasluck Leadership Award, and so far we've had 6 recipients who have shown the quality of their leadership, and we will continue building young people's capacity to become leaders of the future. I've worked with a school in which they've established a Minerals and Energy Academy. I'm currently working with industry and a number of schools to look at a transport and a plumbing academy as 2 separate entities in which students who want to pursue a career in that area will be able to engage and begin an educational pathway. For the environment, I will build on the Hasluck's Green Map and work with all the environmental groups to nurture those parts of the electorate that are bushlands forever, the corridors, and those regions that are important. Mental health and the work that is still yet to be done will become a focus of my activity in this term, and I will work again with state and federal governments to look at the way in which we can provide the services to the people who need them. I want to develop within my electorate a Lean On Me strategy, and that is in door knocking, and I do door knocking regularly. I meet people who are lonely, who don't have people within their lives, and rely on the local bank or the local post office or the occasional interaction with somebody to overcome that loneliness. But I've often thought that the degree of loneliness was not across the age continuum, but what I'm finding is there are young people who are lonely. I find people who have lost a partner after death for the first 9 months are visited by family members, and then they drop off and then they're on their own. Everyone needs compassion and needs to be connected to others within their community, so I'm working with a number of organisations to bring that to a reality. I also want to focus on senior and aged care needs, self-funded retirees, and be an advocate in many areas that are important to them in their lives. I want to focus on aircraft noise that will span the political horizon for the next 3 years and remains a priority in the focus of the work that I will undertake with my local parliamentary colleagues. I will continue to door knock. I door knock 2 days a month where I go out and I meet people and hear what the issues are. And I connect park meetings, coffee shop programs and many other ways in which I can hear their concerns and then represent them to various ministers or within the forums that are available. I enjoy the opportunity of being a member of a number of parliamentary committees, the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Health, where I can bring into play my experience within the bureaucracy of health, the Parliamentary Joint Standing Committee on Human Rights, and the privilege of chairing the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But something I want to focus on for the future myself is changing our planning mindset. Often all of us think of today, tomorrow, the next event, but we never push beyond into the future of 2015, 2020, 2030. The world has changed in many ways, and we can see that from what is occurring within the last 2 decades. I enjoy reading the works of James Canton, who is the CEO and Chairman of the Institute of Global Futures, Patrick Dixon, Future Wise, and particularly his book, The 6 Faces of Global Change, and Bernard Salt, who challenged the way in which we should consider the future of our society. How are we planning for a world that continues to change at a more rapid pace in all aspects of our culture? Business, technology, medicine, security, terrorism, population and environment. It's happening today, tomorrow, and into the future. The world continues to change in every way. It changes at a rapid pace and increases the challenges for legislators. I want to get us into thinking about being future-wise, planning to change future thinking at every level to adapt to the global change which is fast, urban, tribal, universal, radical and ethical. And we saw that in the work that the Treasurer, the Honourable Joe Hockey, undertook in leading the discussions and debates at the G20, where a global economy impacts on all of us. We're not isolated. The whole concept of globalisation, global corporatisation, and the flat earth model in which sovereign boundaries are no longer barriers to global companies. Similar practices applied by commercial companies which develop a strong business case that has an embedded futuristic projection of the benefits and the potential to have a return for investment should be the focus of this Parliament into the future. Our legacy should not be the political and personal gains, but a legacy that positions Australia for our children and future generations. Deputy Speaker, we need to look to the future not for the term of a parliament or the policies of expedience based on political philosophies, but on what is best for the future. We position ourselves through our free trade agreements to optimise our balance of payments, our trade, but also our interactions with other nations that are within the region. And what I want to do is see the future for those who live within my electorate to be given the opportunity to become part of the global society and not be restricted or constrained by the lack of educational opportunity or training opportunities. It is about creating pathways through engagement and through informing. I'll continue always to focus on those that need the levels of intervention. But again, in policy directions, it is my intention over the next terms of my time here to use the opportunities to generate the debates and the thinking about how we move into a future role that is dynamic. I'd also compliment the Minister for Foreign Affairs in the way in which she has certainly engaged Australia in the global forums that are an integral part of our economy, our wealth and our opportunities to create jobs for those within our country. But one of the pleasures I had, and it was a nice touch when one of my staff, Jill Bonanno, came and saw me and said, "You have to swear on a Bible." And she said, "I was given a Bible when she was baptised at the age of 19, and she asked if I would, as a personal gesture and to help with her value of that, was to use it when I was sworn in this time." So it gave me great pleasure in being able to say to Jill, "I will do that for you." And it's the little things that we do as members in this House for constituents within our electorates, not only our staff but within electorates, that make the difference. I reflected on a couple of the comments made by the member for Oxley, who again talked about the need for us to engage locally within each of our electorates, because it is the little things that become the big memories for people who acknowledge the way in which you reach out, listen with respect, and then engage them and act on their behalf. And to conclude, I look forward to this term in Parliament. It is easier being on the government benches because you're able to do some things you can't do from opposition, because it's always hard to convince a minister to invest in your electorate when you're in opposition. But let me also conclude by saying, Deputy Speaker, that often people view us as being in conflict as members in this House, but I have made some tremendous friendships across all spheres of the House, and I value the colleagues who make a contribution on behalf of their electorates in the way that they advocate, work in committees on the way that we deliver what is required for the decisions that occur. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I'm very pleased to be speaking in this address and reply. I'd like to, of course, start by thanking the people of Richmond for re-electing me for a fourth term. It is indeed a great honour and a privilege to represent what is in fact the most beautiful part of Australia, the electorate of Richmond, with its diversity and its people, its communities and its landscape. It is truly unique, from the pristine beaches to the beautiful hinterland. It is one of the most beautiful parts of Australia. I'd of course like to thank all of those who supported me throughout the election campaign, and to all those people that volunteered their time because they had such a strong commitment to the Labor values and Labor policies that we took to the election. I thank and acknowledge all their hard work. And of course, I also acknowledge the many people in the community that I spoke to and continue to speak to over the years, and the issues they raised, particularly the concerns they had about the impact of a Liberal national government. And I can assure the people of the North Coast that I'll be holding this government to account on a whole range of issues, all those issues that impact the people of the North Coast. And we're already seeing some of those impacts hurting the people on the North Coast. We're seeing cuts by the government, particularly to areas around regional funding, through the Regional Development Funding Round 5 cuts. We're seeing cuts to the school kids bonus as well. Of course, there's a lot of concern about plans for a $6 GP tax, which would be devastating for an area like Richmond, particularly with the large number of pensioners in my area. And just today, in question time, we saw the Prime Minister refuse to rule out cuts to the age pension, which also would be devastating for many people, as there is a very high proportion of old age pensioners living on the north coast of New South Wales. Of course, we also saw from the government last year their threat to impose GST on the rents of mobile home residents, and indeed a strong community campaign forced to back down on this unfair tax grab. We're also seeing, in terms of a strong community campaign, quite a strong one against the government's plans for that doctor tax and their plans to dismantle Medicare. Right throughout the country, we are seeing people mobilising because of their concerns to our universal health system, and I certainly stand with them in making sure that people can access the healthcare services that they need when they require them. So it's only been a number of months, and we're already seeing some very harsh impacts being felt, particularly in regional areas, and as I say, I'll continue to highlight those concerns. During the campaign, there was also a very positive response to the record funding the Labor government delivered to the area. And of course, the major issue in my electorate was indeed opposition to harmful coal seam gas mining, which I'll detail a bit later on. But I'd like to say I'm very proud to work closely with many people on the North Coast to have delivered this record funding whilst I've been the local MP. More than $1.5 billion was delivered for local improvements, and of course many of those came from the economic stimulus projects, are so vital to protect and create local jobs, and also to provide very, very important infrastructure. And I'd like to outline some of those that have made a very big difference in the north coast of New South Wales, particularly the Pacific Highway upgrade. There was more than $350 million for the Sextons Hill upgrade, and more than $550 million for the Tinton Bar to Ewingsdale upgrade, which is in fact the single biggest ever infrastructure investment on the North Coast, and it is being constructed as we speak, and we're looking forward to that being finalised and having all of those Pacific Highway upgrades finished up there. Of course, I was also very proud to deliver the GP Super Clinic to South Tweed. It's been open for a long period of time now and doing providing exceptionally great service to many people within the area. Of course, all of the funding to local schools has made a huge difference as well. What was also really important was the investment in community infrastructure, like the Community Centre for Mooloolah, or the Regional Sport and Cultural Complex in Byron Bay, or the Lennox Head Community Centre. Indeed, other sports infrastructure, like $5 million in funding for the new Arkansas Park upgrades for netball and tennis facilities in South Tweed. And this also is under construction. We very much look forward to that being finalised, a great resource for locals there. And also we're hoping that it will be a bit of a central point for a lot of training as well, particularly on the netball front. Also more than $2 million for the world's first surfing centre of excellence at Casuarina, and great to have that open and providing some really important mentoring for many people right across the country that come there, and great to have a world's first in beautiful Casuarina, world's first surfing centre of excellence. So as I say, it's been a real honour to be given the opportunity to continue to represent the people of the North Coast and to work with them to keep on achieving those best results for locals and to improve our infrastructure and surrounds on the North Coast. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, Richmond is indeed a very diverse electorate. That's what makes us incredibly special. Stretching from Skennis Head in the south to Tweed Heads in the north, from Byron Bay in the east to Nimbin in the west, Richmond has significant agricultural areas and urban areas as well, like Tweed Heads, very vibrant and active coastal areas like Byron Bay, and really strong rural-based communities like Murwillumbah or Mullumbimby, but very diverse areas. And of course, during the election over the past years, I've continued to have many discussions with the people of the North Coast, and the message was very clear and consistent. Locals have a very clear idea about the sort of community they want. They want one where they're able to access the services they require, if that's health or aged care or educational or community services. They want to see investments in regional infrastructure. They very importantly want to have jobs in their local area, in their local regional area. They want their children to be able to have jobs, quality jobs in regional areas, and they want to see an emphasis on making sure we have strong local economies. But in areas like mine, of course, they also really importantly want to see that we have a sustainable environment, and they want to see effective action on climate change. That was a very big issue during the election campaign. And all of these issues featured very prominently during the campaign, but indeed the single issue that was raised with me time and time again were the very real fears shared by many locals about the impact of harmful coal seam gas mining on the North Coast. And indeed this continues to be the single largest issue across all levels of government, all community groups, all individuals. No matter where you go, this is the issue that people talk about. It's the issue of concern to them. They have real and genuine concerns as to what could happen to our environment, to our water, to our communities if this industry was allowed to expand on the New South Wales North Coast. And in a very real way, the 2013 federal election in Richmond was in fact a referendum on whether the community wanted coal seam gas mining, and in fact the people have now clearly spoken. It's clear by the result in the Richmond electorate that the voters have rejected coal seam gas mining. They believe it's unsafe and environmentally destructive. As I say, the electorate's made it very, very clear how they feel about it, and they're very worried about the ramifications of coal seam gas mining, what it will have on current and future generations, and the impact on our area. Now, nearly all the villages and towns, along with the local councils of Tweed, Byron and Lismore on the North Coast, have made declarations to be coal seam gas mining free. And in fact, the movement against coal seam gas mining has been growing for a considerable period of time, and in the past years, of course, it has grown more and more. And is in fact, of course, this movement is now directed specifically, indeed, against many within the National Party in our area and their very strong pro-CSG agenda. And it particularly refers to our state members of parliament, as in fact, as we know, it is the state government that regulates and licenses coal seam gas mining. What concerns me and concerns the community is that all of our state National Party MPs on the North Coast actively and publicly endorse coal seam gas mining in our area. And in doing so, they've ignored the people of the North Coast. They've chosen to support the interests of big mining companies, coal seam gas mining companies, and completely ignore the will of the people that they have been elected to represent. And to understand how big an issue this is and the impact of it, it's important to examine the magnitude of public support against coal seam gas mining and to look at the history of this community activism. So I'm going to run through some of those major events. There are many more, but here are some major ones in terms of the community's concerns. On the 9th of April 2012, the Lismore City Council voted 6-5 in support of the motion to have a specific poll to gauge views on coal seam gas mining. And the poll was held then in conjunction with the September 12 local government election. The result of this poll was overwhelmingly against coal seam gas mining, with 87% voting against it, a huge number, 87%. Also, on the 25th of October 2012, the Tweed Shire councillors voted 6-1 for a moratorium on coal seam gas mining. On the 31st of October 2013, The Byron Shire councillors, off the back of a survey which showed some 98% of residents wanted the Shire declared and to remain CSG-free, restated their support for a gas-field-free Shire that incorporates a coal seam gas mining exclusion zone. Also, the North Coast Peak Council for Local Councils, NOROC, has considered this issue, coal seam gas mining, so significant that they funded research for the effect of CSG on the environment. This means we now have a situation where the councils in nearly all the villages and towns along the North Coast have themselves made declarations to be CSG mining free. This is a strong declaration of the people's will. And in fact, when you drive through those smaller villages, and we are lucky to have many, many vibrant and wonderful villages on the North Coast, you will constantly see many lock the gate signs. You will see signs declaring they are coal seam gas mining free. We have had dozens of small villages that continue to make those declarations, and they go street to street to make sure their concerns are heard about how worried they are about the impact of this industry possibly expanding in our area. And of course, across the North Coast, we've had many groups that have come together to support this anti-coal seam gas mining movement. And some of those groups, it's not limited to, but certainly some of those groups do include the North Coast Environment Council, CSG Free Northern Rivers, the Tweed Lock the Gate Alliance led by Michael McNamara, the Nimbin Environment Centre and the 100% Renewable Campaign, the Caldera Environment Centre, the Transition Byron Shire, the wonderful Knitting Nanas, who continue to do such a great job in highlighting their concerns. Also the Byron Environment Centre as well. There are, of course, Mr Deputy Speaker, many, many other community groups and individuals who have been a part of this ongoing campaign to make sure that their concerns are always heard in relation to this. So I think there's been possibly no greater demonstration of this determined to stop coal seam gas mining than the display of strength at various protests and rallies. And on the 14th of May 2011 in Murwillumbah, there were some 8,000 people who marched through the town to demand a stop to the practice of coal seam gas mining. And this is very impressive, particularly when you consider the town's population is in fact far less than that. People came from far and wide to be a part of this protest. Also in May 2012, around 7,000 people marched against CSG in Lismore. Again, a major number for these regional towns. And on the 15th of October 2012, around 4,000 people marched again against CSG in Murwillumbah in a day of action against the industry. And that day, of course, was known as Rock the Gate. And also, I mean, as recently as December 2013, we again saw the Tweed Shire Council reaffirming its call for a moratorium on CSG operations. And I was pleased to see that they did reaffirm that. And of course, I'd like to point out to the House that that resolution was carried 5 votes to 2. And of course, we did see the 2 people who voted against it, yes, you guessed it, the National Party councillors. So what we have at all those levels of government, we see this massive support from the National Party, whether it's at council level or state level or federal level. We see their pro-CSG agenda, and that was confirmed for us just as recently as December in that vote on council when we saw those two National Party members vote against it. Also, Mr Deputy Speaker, in outlining the history of the community's concerns about coal seam gas, on the 14th of February 2013, the former member for Page, Janelle Saffin, and I launched a petition calling on the New South Wales Government to declare an immediate moratorium on all CSG activities and licences within the boundaries of the state parliamentary seats of Lismore, Ballina, Clarence and Tweed on the New South Wales North Coast, and further declaring them to be CSG-free and thereafter off-limits to the CSG industry. The petition happened because the people of the North Coast were in fact ignored by their state National Party MPs who failed to represent their concerns. Now, in a very short period of time, the petition got more than 12,000 signatures and was presented to the Speaker of the New South Wales Parliament for subsequent debate on the 30th of October 2013. And when the debate occurred, it was disappointing for a number of reasons. Firstly, the only North Coast members who spoke were the members for Ballina and the member for Lismore. I assume the member for Tweed was hiding and remaining silent on the debate, as he often does on many issues. I know the member for Clarence didn't bother to speak either. But when the members for Ballina and Lismore spoke in the debate, neither supported the proposal to have the North Coast declared coal seam gas mining free, neither supported the wishes of the majority of residents. So we had this petition which, in a sense, forced them to actually come and speak about this issue, and they refused to back the wishes of the people of the North Coast, completely ignoring them, completely abandoning them. And this is not what the people want from their state MPs. They want MPs to listen and to act on their concerns. They want action, and they certainly didn't see that. It's also important, I think, to note that whilst in government we took action under the EPBC Act in relation to coal seam gas mining. Important to have that on the record. Federal Labor and Government passed an amendment to expand national environmental laws under the EPBC, in which we had water as a trigger in relation to CSG activities to cover the impacts of coal seam gas mining projects on water resources. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, locals know the biggest threat to their way of life is the ongoing agenda of the National Party's pro-CSG drilling, fracking and expansion agenda. They know that it is the National Party who are the environmental vandals when it comes to this and other issues. And we do know, in fact, the coalition government have a very strong history of supporting coal seam gas mining. And we see reports constantly just how committed both the Liberal and National parties are to the growth of the CSG industry. And I must say it was quite disturbing when we saw last November the new industry minister telling an energy summit in New South Wales. Last November he was talking about that, and he was saying that he wanted uniform regulations for exploration and production of coal seam gas mining across state borders, whilst warning opponents of coal seam gas to respect the law, labelling some of them as anarchists. And I can tell you that really caused a great deal of offence for those many people that are opposed to coal seam gas mining. We are not anarchists. We have people of all ages, of all backgrounds, that have put forward their views in a very democratic way about the concerns they have for their environment. We have women from the CWA, which I'm proudly a member, I will add, who marched in some of those rallies that I spoke about, and it's offensive that the Resources Minister calls outstanding women like that anarchists. And in fact it's insulting, and it's insulting that he continues to not listen to the wishes of people when they are right across all different backgrounds, the people that are so concerned about this. And I think we're also concerned too when we see of late the Resources Minister talks about setting up a task force as well. Now, we're not quite sure what this task force will be. We've seen some reports that he's working on the make-up and role of the task force to speed up coal seam gas mine development projects in New South Wales. He's very, very much involved, the new Resources Minister, very committed to coordinating and getting coal seam gas mining on the agenda. I'd like to know exactly what this task force will be, who will be on it, who he intends having on it, and what they intend doing and which areas they intend going to. And in saying this, I'm reflecting the views of many people on the North Coast who have said that to me. They're very keen to find out the level of detail they can about this task force, because no doubt this minister, seemingly on the first few days that he was in power, has made it very, very clear, despite things that he said prior to the election, he is 100% behind coal seam gas mining. And look, at the end of the day, Mr Deputy Speaker, I talk to people all the time about what we can do as a community to keep the issue of stopping coal seam gas mining on the agenda. And people are very much aware that it's only Labor on the North Coast that will stop it. They see at all other levels of government this massive push to have the mining there, whether it's on council having the National Party vote, whether it's the state MPs pushing it all the time, whether it's the federal minister out there pushing it. They see that constantly. They know that it's Labor that stands with the community. They understand that, and we'll continue to do that, because this is an issue that has united people, unlike any issues that I've seen before. And I think it's important to keep in mind the reason many people move to the North Coast of New South Wales, and they're actually making a conscious choice about the sort of area they want to live in. They want to live in an area that has such a pristine hinterland, the beaches, the beautiful ranges, all of that. They love the area. It's a great place to raise a family, a great place to live in. And because they're so attuned and so respectful of their environment, that's in fact why many people of all ages and all backgrounds have become involved in this campaign. So whilst there are many issues, of course, I'll always be fighting for people on the North Coast, and I continue to advocate here or locally at home, there is one issue that as a community we are united on, that we will be fighting at all levels of government to make sure we get an outcome. And I put this to the National Party. I say to them that you have underestimated the resolve of people in our area and how far we intend fighting to make sure we have this area declared coal seam gas mining free. And in conclusion, I'd like to make it clear that it's only the Labor Party that will stand with those people. The National Party have walked away, and I know that they will pay the price for that in upcoming state elections and council elections. The fact is people are not going to vote for a party, for candidates who continue to push forward an industry that will be so destructive to our area, not just to our environment but particularly to our water resources and our water supplies as well. That is something that troubles so many people. We've currently got a licence that goes over one of the major water resources for the Tweed area. So the impact will be absolutely huge in our area. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, can I say again what an honour it is to have been re-elected and been re-elected on a range of issues, but one in particular that I and the Labor Party are committed to fighting to make sure that together we can ensure that the north coast of New South Wales is coal seam gas mining free.
Order. The question is that the address be agreed to, and I call the member for Herbert.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to start by stating the obvious. I'm over the moon about being back here for a second term and to represent my seat of Herbert and my city of Townsville in this nation's 44th Parliament. I feel a great debt of gratitude to the electors of Herbert and assure them that I will be here and in my electorate doing my best for our city and our region. No one wins an election by themselves. The team behind me was massive last year. I would like to acknowledge my immediate and extended family, but especially my wife Linda, my 3 children Emma, Abby and Andrew, for their continued determined support of me and my role. To my staff, ably led by Cherie Lynham, I say thank you. For any sales team to be effective, the back office must be strong. I have a back office of Cherie, Karen Ruffle, Callum Kippen and Kurt Fong. There are none better in this country. That they are able to marshal their families, friends, contacts, casual acquaintances and strangers from the street to help get me re-elected says a lot about their genuine enthusiasm for the role. To all the team who worked so hard, from the leadership group of Tony Abbott, Julie Bishop and Warren Truss, to the party organisations, to the party members in Townsville, to our friends and supporters, I say thank you very much. I want to especially thank a few others who went above and beyond the call of duty. To Michelle, Stephanie, Julie, Andrew and Eleni, I thank you all. I would not be here without you. To the Jones Collective, the FACT, the Young LNP, I say thank you. I want to thank Molly, Dan, Brendan, Dale, Kelsey, Sam, Drew Boy, Emma, Thaddeus, Jessica, Scott, Dr Michael, Crystal, Chelsea, Ryan, Stathy and the hundreds of volunteers these people were dragged to the front line in the name of getting me elected. Deputy Speaker, when Senator Ian MacDonald was first elected to the Senate in 1990, he was the only Liberal north of the southeast corner. That the LNP now boasts the members for Leichhardt, Herbert, Dawson, Capricornia and, if you crib a little bit, Flynn, is full testament to the commitment Ian has to the role of being a senator for Queensland. His work in supporting our candidate, Nolan Icahn, for the seat of Kennedy, where a swing of over 15% was recorded to her, should go down as one of the great campaigns. His recognition of a truly great candidate to give proper representation to the people of North Queensland, North West Queensland, and his willingness to back her all the way should never be underestimated or undervalued. Nolene will come to this place and she will be a great member. I would like to also pass on my personal congratulations to the Coalition's class of 2010. We have all been returned and will become a great force in this parliament. I especially want to congratulate the members for Aston, Kooyong and Riverina for their elevation to parliamentary secretary roles. Deputy Speaker, I do not propose to spend my time here pointing out the weaknesses and errors of the previous government. For a start, I only have 20 minutes. The Abbott government will be a government for all Australians. It will be a government which sets tasks and gets them done. It will be a government which builds infrastructure and will facilitate growth and trade. Locally, we will finish the Townsville Ring Road, finally fix Dalrymple Road, replace the Horton River Bridge, build a community centre and cyclone evacuation centre in the northern beaches, fix the Bowden Road intersection, install lights for walkers on Castle Hill and Riverway Drive and upgrade facilities at the Townsville Showground. Additionally, we will finish the Van Tassel Road extension, which should have been done in 2010. Additional to this will be the establishment of the Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine at James Cook University. It will be a government which will reduce waste and remove the constraints of red tape. Small business has been especially hurt by new and costly regulations and red tape. It has strangled enterprise and it must stop. We will do this because it is not government which creates wealth, nor do they create jobs. What government does is set the parameters around which business can do things and then get out of the way. That is what we will do. Our Treasurer, JB Hockey, stated in a speech to the Centre for Independent Studies that the Coalition has a plan in 3 parts. First, we must be honest about the challenges we face. Second, we must lay down the roadmap that helps us deal with those challenges. And third, we must harness the support of the nation as we follow that roadmap, notwithstanding the obstacles which will be put in our way. No matter the sector, no matter the industry, no matter the cause or campaign, these basic tenets are true, and we need to heed these words. If we do not include the people of Australia in our vision, we are doomed to fail. I will challenge our side of politics that we look further than the political wedge or the news grab for our discourse with the Australian people. We all deserve better than we have had. We have to be able to articulate that vision to the future. We have to get the people of Australia to understand and know that vision. And we have to deliver on that vision, keeping Australians informed along the way. That is the mission we have undertaken, and it's a mission in which I am proud to play a part. The Abbott government took a series of commitments to the September 7 election, and we will honour our commitments. Central to this is the repeal of the carbon tax. No issue can be clearer to the people of Australia during the election. If you want the carbon tax removed, you vote for a coalition candidate. Nothing could be clearer. That we won 90 seats in a very clear majority should tell all those in this House what people want. They want this toxic tax gone. I urge the Labor Party to respect this mandate as we respected their mandate to remove work choices. To do otherwise is to thumb your nose at the people of this great nation. Townsville is a hub for our region and the north of our country. It will continue to be so and grow with its responsibility and reputation for being able to get things done. Whether it is the West and Northwest Minerals Province and its renewable energy corridor possibilities, or the North and East to PNG and Fiji and the Melanesian world, where we will grow to become an educational trade hub for that dynamic arc of the Pacific, Townsville will be part of the future. The future is indeed bright, but only if we grab it with both hands. Tony Abbott's backing of the White Paper and the development of Northern Australia is an act of pure leadership. Clearly, this is an incredibly important part of my future in this place. That there are only 8 House of Representatives seats north of the Tropic of Capricorn in the entire country means that there are 142 south of that line. The politically expedient thing to do, if he was just about winning elections, would be to concentrate on other parts of the country. That he and Andrew Robb could see that for the future of our country, the development of the North is an imperative, is a credit to them both. The White Paper is an opportunity to really grab our part of the Asian century. But we must be tenacious in our approach to this. We must remember to keep the paper looking into the future. I want the paper to be framed by the question, if we're having this conversation in 2050 or 2100, what has to have happened for the development of Northern Australia to be a success? We must first and foremost look at what our customers want. We must then decide what can be built, maintained and deliver. We must approach this development of North of Australia at a macro level. Above all, we must get the baseline science right. You do not build a house starting with the roof. You get the foundations right. Everything we do impacts on our environment. It's how we manage those impacts which should drive our decisions. It is pointless if we grow a $20 million crop of mung beans if it wipes out the billion-dollar prawn industry in the Gulf of Carpentaria. James Cook University, the only university to be established with its purpose and education defined towards life in the tropical world, is perfectly placed to lead this venture. We can lead the world on many fronts, from tropical medicine to clean energy generation to technology, if we seize the opportunity. This should not be science versus development project. This should be development guided by science. The White Paper's perspective should look at not only in what private enterprise will invest, but also in what private capital will not invest. Some suggest the use of the $1.4 trillion worth of superannuation savings of Australians should be targeted as a driver here. I'm certainly not against that in principle, but for them to invest, they must either be guaranteed a return, or the enterprise must be first established and proving itself through its returns to be an attractive investment. We cannot speculate on the life savings of other Australians. To throw superannuation savings at speculative investments the way Labor Greens government wanted to do with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation would be folly in the highest order. Venture capital has its place, but it must be supported by taxation reform. That is a discussion in which all Australians must play a part, and I'm willing to be part of that. When Andrew Robb addressed a luncheon in Townsville on his plan to develop the North, he used this description. Presently, there are roughly 500 people in the tropical world, 500 million people in the tropical world. That is, people living between the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer who would be described as middle class. That number is expected to grow to 3.2 billion people by the year 2035. These people will want things, many things, including energy, quality education, quality food, cutting-edge health outcomes, holiday destinations and investment opportunities. If we miss this chance, if we sit back and do not plan, if we wait for them to come and throw money and infrastructure at us, we will be, as Lee Kuan Yew once famously suggested, the white trash of Asia. We have an opening and we must grab it and fight for it. This is too important an opportunity to miss. As a country, we need to ensure our own people are offered opportunity for personal growth and success. From our first Australians to the newest members of our society, the chance to prosper is what makes Australians great. That means that our education, industrial relations and our social security systems need to be working correctly and engaged at every level. Education is the key to everything, I believe. From health outcomes to work and pay, the better the education attitude, the better, statistically at least, you will cope. I do not have a university degree. I'm an auctioneer by trade. But in my life has been blessed, has been given the best possible start by parents who love me and believed in me, and quality teachers at Texas State School and Toowoomba Grammar School, who drilled the basics into me until I knew them by heart and instinct. Under the guidance of Christopher Pyne, the Coalition will allow more autonomy at the local educational level. We will empower principals and school communities to make the decisions. We will need to get more decision-making capability closer to the students so that we get the best possible outcome for our future leaders. There is a lot we can do from this place to assist the states deliver quality education. We must work together and be constructive through COAG to achieve better results for all Australians. From education, we go to work. We must be a country who competes on quality and service. We are a high-wage country. We can have high wages into the future, but if we have low input costs. Over the last 2 terms, we have seen a build-up of regulation and constraints around doing business in Australia. Cleaning these up does not mean a drop in working conditions. It means if we want jobs, we have to service the customer, not the other way around. If we do not, the customer leaves and does not come back. More than that, he tells his friends and they don't come back either. We have needed foreign investment in Australia since 1788, and the world's capital is very, very mobile. We must provide the level of service and productivity we need to present a compelling case for investment. It is that simple. Deputy Speaker, I reaffirm the Coalition's commitment to fair indexation for DFRDB and DFRB military superannuants from July 1st this year, 2014. The use of the CPI as the only lever for increases diminished their pensions' capacity to keep up. The inability of previous governments, going all the way back to Whitlam's, to apply their pensions to the male total average weekly earnings and the pensioners' and beneficiaries' cost of living index measures has taken too long. I am proud to be part of a government which will, from 1st July 2014, finally right this wrong. Coming from Townsville, I am acutely aware of the service given to our community by men and women of our ADF. We need to honour our past, and the centenary of Anzac will be a great moment in time for all Australians. We do, however, need to be vigilant that with our care for the most recent veterans. Additionally, we are also closing on the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Lontan, surely a great moment in Australia to look back and right some more wrongs. As the other members have noted in this place, this must be commemorated with respect and dignity. Deputy Speaker, I'm heartened to hear that the Abbott government will work towards formal recognition of Aboriginal and Islander Australia in our Constitution. This, along with former Prime Minister Rudd's apology to the stolen generation, is a symbolic gesture whose time has come. It will not, however, get one person a job, or stop one person going to jail, or stop one more student disengaging from the education system. Those are things which must be corrected in conjunction with our First Australians, but it must be driven by them, for them. We in this place must offer every assistance and incentive, but there must be an outcome. In many cases, we are talking about changing generational disengagement. That is not easy, it never has been. But nothing worthwhile comes with no effort. There will be mistakes and errors. There will be people hurt along the way. For too long, good-intentioned people have sat back and made excuses to look the other way. For too long, the answer has been simply to throw more money at the problem. It is my firm belief that money is not the answer. It has created industries where people have profited from others' misery. It has, in some cases, meant that corruption has occurred. I will make it my business to uncover corruption where the victims are the most vulnerable in our society. There must be a way to hold the individuals to account. It has to happen, and it must start now. As a matter of fact, Deputy Speaker, on the weekend there was a meeting of local Aboriginal and Islander elders aimed at engaging kids at risk. Not just the kids in the system, but there's the kids that that may be at risk of getting into the system. That's where our focus has to be. We have to spend money, but it costs over $100,000 a year to keep someone in jail, and we have to keep that in perspective. The answer to getting people out of poverty is worthwhile. The answer to getting people out of poverty is worthwhile and meaningful work. Minister Andrews is always saying the best social security you can ever give someone is a job. Senator Nigel Scollion has always made the observation that this is not a black problem. This is not a problem purely for Aboriginal and Islander people. This is a poverty problem. This problem exists everywhere in the world where poverty exists. This is a problem everywhere in the world where people cannot engage properly in education and health systems or get meaningful work. We, as a country and a society, must stand up and be counted. There are many steps to take, and many debates, discussions, disagreements and knock-down, drag-em-out arguments to take along the way. But we should have these debates. But meaningful work should be the goal for every Australian. I said in my maiden speech that no one would be left behind. I meant it then and I mean it now. Australia is a great country and I represent the best part of that great country. North Queensland is an absolutely magnificent place, and Townsville is obviously the greatest place in North Queensland. As the Treasurer said, there are challenges, and we must produce the roadmap to better times, which will include bringing everyone together and allowing them to play their part. I will be doing my best to represent my city and my region for the next 3 years. Townsville and its people are a forward-looking group. They are the group that sees the glass half full. They are the fox terrier that is always chasing after something. They are the blue cattle dog that's always looking to work. We are optimists. We are the workers who will get things done, and we will continue to do so. And I thank the House.
I thank the member for Herbert. The question is that the address be agreed to. I call the member for Morton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I begin this speech by acknowledging the traditional owners and thank them for their continuing stewardship. It's been just over 6 years since we had the very first Welcome to Country in this parliament under Prime Minister Rudd, before Parliament started out in the foyer under the flag. It had been a long time coming, but I'm proud to say that is continued. In fact, continues every day in this parliament under a range of speakers. Soon after that Welcome to Country, it was the apology to the stolen generations, and when I look back on my 6 years, that was still my best day in Parliament. There's been some good days since then, obviously, many good days. Even today, welcoming the new member for Griffith, Terry Butler, into the Parliament, following in the footsteps of former Prime Minister Rudd. That is a good day, and I welcome and look forward to working with the new member for Griffith. And also, while acknowledging former friends, acknowledge the former member for Petrie, Yvette Darth, and her win on the weekend. I'd also like to acknowledge one of my constituents who's up in the gallery as well, Laurie Woods. Laurie Woods is Laurie Woods DFC from Sunnybank. I know Laurie well, and I'll tell a little bit about Laurie in acknowledging him. He joined the Royal Australian Air Force in June 1942 at the tender age of 19. He only looks like he's in his late 50s, but he's a little bit older. Laurie has some great books out. He's here on a bit of a book-selling tour at the moment, they're great yarns, talking about his time as a bomb aimer with number 460 Squadron at RAF Binbrook in Lincolnshire, and he recalls that of the 49 aircrew posted to number 460 Squadron, which is 7 crews, when they flew their last operation, only 8 men were left alive by October 1944. There's also, he tells the tale of when the aircraft was damaged and the pilot was wounded after a raid on Wanna Eagle. Laurie had to fly the plane. So it's good to have a constituent here, Laurie. He's here and having a bit of a look around Parliament House. I know him from the Sunnybank RSL, but I'll just give you a bit of orientation. I know you weren't the navigator, Laurie, but I'll just give you some orientation of Parliament House. So we're on the eastern side, and we've got green carpet over here. So you need to think of it like the military. So there's 150 House of Reps on this side of the flagpole, and so you think of them like the army. Okay, the 150 House of Reps people, they do all the grunt work. All right, 150 of them, Laurie. Then if you go to the other side of the flagpole, on the western side, you've got red carpet. Now, it should really be white carpet because they're like the Navy, the white ensign, okay? We don't really know what they do over there, the other side of the flagpole, but they're a bit like the Navy. They're important, they serve a role. But we all know, Laurie, that the most important part, not the front where the public is, where you came in, but the important part of the Parliament House is the blue carpet out the back. And that's just like the military. It's like the RAF. Everyone, whether they're in the green carpet or the red carpet, you know, the reps or the Senate, they all want to be on the blue carpet. It's just like the ADF. Everyone wants to be in the Air Force. Isn't that right, Laurie? The Air Force is the best. I'll take that interjection. The Air Force is the best. Laurie, on a more serious note, I would like to thank you and the generation you represent, because not all of your flying comrades are here, not all of your military comrades are here with us today, but I do thank you and your generation for the bravery that you showed. And he's here with my publisher, or his publisher, Dan Kelly, and my publisher, Dan Kelly, who runs a printing business in my electorate, who's here. So it's good to see you as well, Dan Kelly. It really is a privilege to be able to speak in this 44th Parliament. And I'm here today because of the incredible support I received from people like Laurie and the good people of Morton, and from many volunteers, including people from the Australian Labor Party. So to all of my friends and comrades from the union movement, to the community groups, to the organisations, to the branch members and to my family, I thank you for the great work that you have done. And I am going to mention some of those in particular. Jules Campbell from the AMWU, who is the volunteer coordinator. Jules, who so skillfully organised people to tell that Labor story. We didn't have money for billboards like my opponent. We didn't have money, we didn't have a lot of fundraising money coming our way, but we were able to go out and tell that Labor story of the things that we believe in, of justice, of equity, of opportunity. 3 principles laid down on a base of dignity, employment and education, the things that we bring to the Australian story. I also thank Trent Abbeyfield from the CPSU, who helped coordinate many of those, the ability to tell those stories to the people of Morton. To the community leaders. Now, I know it's dangerous when you start mentioning some, that I won't cover all of them, and I know I won't, but I would like to particularly mention Lewis Lee, who worked tirelessly throughout the campaign and over the last decade or so for the people of the South Side, irrespective of what political party they are connected with. To Melody Chen, to Peter Cow, Professor Chu, to Wayne Coe, to Anthony Lin, to Danny Yeo, to Peter Lau, to Stanley Su, to Janet Dean and Mustafa Ali, to name but a few. I'd also like to mention three of the hardest working Brisbane City councillors. My councillor, my local councillor Steve Griffiths, to Milton Dick from the Richlands ward, and also to Nicole Johnson, who's actually not a member of the Labor Party. She's not from my tribe, but she's a great, fantastic local advocate who is always prepared to tell people what the truth is in her electorate, irrespective of the consequences. So to all three of those, their support, your support and advice on council issues was critical for the campaign we ran in Morton. I say so because one of the important issues was the Sardine City Plan, which is being imposed on the people of the south side of Brisbane. And I know that there's more work to be done, and I am committed to carrying out more information and education campaigns about Lord Mayor Graham Quirk's Sardine City plans, and also the person who will actually be signing off on those plans, and that when it goes to the state government, and that will be the former Lord Mayor, the now Premier of Queensland, Campbell Newman. He'll be signing off on the Sardine City Plan and the incredible consequences it will mean for people all over Brisbane. You know, with much smaller backyards, much smaller lots, not even being consulted about what is taking place next door. You won't know that a set of units is going up until you see a tradesman ute turn up. That's not the way you consult with the community. So more to be done. I know that we have to contact the state members connected with the south side of Brisbane, or all over Brisbane really, to make sure they understand that people are unhappy with this proposed Brisbane City Plan. A plan that would forever change the character of the suburbs on the south side of Brisbane. If you've driven around that area, you know the old Queenslanders, the tin and timber that makes Queensland homes special, will instead have no more verandas or backyards to speak of. Now, I know that you need development. I'm not one of those just focused on the 1950s. I know that climate change is real, so we just can't keep building further and further away from our community facilities, particularly when we have a federal government that has made a commitment to not fund public transport. Now that means that we can't go further and further away. We've got to have appropriate development, but it must be appropriate and it must be done in consultation with our communities. Don't hide from people what you're doing. You must have fair income consultation, fair income community meetings, give people a chance to speak up and speak. Otherwise, their communities will be changed forever. And we wouldn't want it to happen in places like Maruka or Chelmer or Gracewood or Sherwood or anywhere, basically, in Brisbane. We need to keep consulting and engaging with the community. It should not be something that people are scared of, even when it's an unpalatable discussion you're going to have. So we can't let Campbell Newman and his White Shoe Brigade mates change our suburbs without any consultation or input from people on the south side. I also thank the many wonderful activists from the 10 Labor Party branches that touch on Morton. Personally, I'm in the Walter Taylor branch, and I know that they're the best branch, but I also thank all of the other branches and the people that stepped up to do work. Sasha Marin from the Annerley branch was indefatigable, was seen everywhere, and really made sure that the Annerley branch continued that tradition of covering a much broader area than they actually represent. I also mentioned some other activists: Cam Crowther, Rod Beisel, Sandeep Sarathi, Ricky Lee, Joe McGrath, Alice Alwett, Phil Day, Norm Bullen, Joanne Phillips, Jesse Thompson, Inez Amilda, Felix Gibson, who was the school captain of Nyanda State High School, the school that was closed down under the Newman government. Also Craig Wood, Jennifer and Dallas Elvery, Brendan Crotty, Sam Pidgeon, and all of the education people associated with those guys, to Michael Oliver, Ken Boyne, Anna Marie Newton, and former councillor Mark Bailey, who was also a great help with the Sardine City campaign that I mentioned earlier. There are hundreds of other volunteers whose names I don't have time to go through. People who spent months and in some cases years of going out knocking on doors, telephoning people, going out and doing street stalls. I was starting to think that Sasha Marin only lived on street stalls and didn't have a home to go to. I saw her out so often. I know that's a hard slog when you've got policies that people have questions about, but obviously the Labor Party will only thrive when we have the ability to sit down and talk to people, to look in their eyes and say, this is the reasoning behind a policy, this is what we believe in. This is what we bring to the south side. Obviously, the story in Morton was tough. On election night, 13 seats that had a bigger margin than mine fell to the Labor Party. So it was a tough night for Labor, with nearly 18 seats falling. I was fortunate enough to have a swing to me, and a lot of it goes back to the work of those volunteers in my electorate on a night when not many Labor people did have a swing to them. My wonderful office staff, Kate, who comes to Canberra with me, to Norma, who organises basically my entire life, to Isaac, who sadly has gone back to university via Europe to become a school teacher and won't be in the office anymore, to Peter, who always has time for individual complaints, to Andrew, to Melanie and Lee. I thank them and their families who, because so many of their children and loved ones missed them during the election campaign because they were working above and beyond for Morton. I'd like to make special mention of Lee Lunny, who is on maternity leave, actually delivered her baby the day before the election. So probably one of the last babies in Queensland born under Prime Minister Rudd, Sid Coggins. I say hi to you, and I hope you won't be too old before you get to experience another Labor Prime Minister, maybe before your third birthday even. I thank Terry Wood and Matt Jutson especially, but the person with her hand firmly on the rudder of the good ship Morton is my great friend and a former union comrade, Ros McLennan. Ros, your management of the campaign with Jules and Terry and the leadership team ensured that it ran precisely like a fine quality Swiss watch. Finally, to my own family, to my boys Leo and Stanley and my wife Lee, thank you for the sacrifice that you have made because of my political career. I believe that every politician who is a parent is selfish. You have to be a politician that is connected with your electorate. Obviously, our families make the sacrifice because of our commitment to our electorates, and I know the people of Morton appreciate the fact that you were able to let me spend so much time with them rather than with you, but I know that that is the sad part of being a politician. So not a day goes by in this chamber where I don't remember the sacrifices made by in this chamber and in my office, where I remember the sacrifices made by the hundreds of hard-working volunteers. I'll never forget those that gave so much. I say that because when I walk down the hall going into my office, I have an entire wall of photographs of all the volunteers, so I know you are watching me, making sure that I do my job well, and I promise that I won't let you down. I won't let you down because I believe in striving for a brighter future. I believe in that light on the hill. It's what the Labor Party is about. We look to the future, not behind us with rose-coloured glasses dreaming about a past that never was, that never existed. I believe in tomorrow and what it can bring for all, not just looking at the past. When I first rose in this House 6 years ago, I promised to deliver for the people of Morton, and the best way to check on a politician's if they've met their KPIs is go and look at their first speech. So I had a look at my first speech, and in that I promised, I made a commitment to rolling out sound barriers on Ryawena Road, and that was delivered in 2008. I talked about the Toohey Road bike path, and that was delivered on the 3rd of June 2009. The Acacia Ridge Elizabeth Street rail overpass, something that I'd been campaigning on since 2003. That was delivered on the 5th of June 2009. I also made mention to the Chinese War Memorial, which Laurie would know all about because it's at the Sunnybank RSL in consultation with the Chinese community, the Chinese diaspora. And the first sod was turned by Ralph Cedo, representing the Chinese community, and Phil Lepp, representing the Sunnybank RSL on the 16th of July 2010. And it's still a wonderful part of the community, and the legacy continues every year where there is a student from local schools who also tells the story of those Chinese Australians who weren't citizens but were able to die in the service of their country. The big commitment I made going way, way back to 2003 was the Kessels and Mains Road upgrade, and if you are in Morton today, you can actually drive under that overpass. It's taken forever and still got a lot to go, but you can actually drive under that overpass today. The first sod was turned in January 2012 with the member for Graindler and announced in the 2011 May budget, and they're on track to finish and should even finish early. The Southside Community Centre, which has been opened, or it's being renovated at the moment, been purchased and opened and being renovated in Maruka. 6 years ago, I also spoke in my first speech about the importance of organ donation because a friend of mine had just died. Now, the Rudd government's reform of the organ donor system is one of the most significant, yet one of the least talked about achievements of the previous government. When we assumed the government mentions organ donation was sitting at around 10 donors per million of the population, which is disgraceful. I think everyone would agree. Since then, rates have risen steadily to 15.6, and it's heading north. More to be done, and I think it's a bipartisan, a joint ticket on that one. Despite this outstanding achievement, we still have one of the lowest levels of organ donation in the developed world. Organ donations save lives, and I remain committed to ensuring that this trend continues. Another topic that I mentioned in my speech was about racism and the Racial Discrimination Act. I think I was elected by the people of Morton, which is a very multicultural electorate, because I represent their values. In fact, in 2007, I ran in an election against a sitting member who had said in a radio interview, and I quote, "My community is being exhausted by African refugees." Surely, close quote, surely an opportunity to appeal to the lesser angels in Australian society. You know, in my first speech, I made my position on racism and hate very clear. And I quote, "Contrary to earlier misguided statements, I do not see an exhausted community. Instead, I see suburbs full of people who are committed to getting on with and helping their neighbours." I think that we do need to be eternally vigilant to make sure that the people of Morton and the people of Australia understand about racism. I'm concerned about the Attorney-General's intention to repeal Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. I think that's misguided. I think that that sort of bigoted and vitriolic abuse that can seriously damage one's mental health and break down community cohesion and sometimes lead to acts of physical violence can start with this sort of behaviour. We too often see when we have people fanning the flames, like Alan Jones did back in around the time of the Cronulla riots, when he called those young men vermin and mongrels. That sort of stuff should never be tolerated. Now, I'm disappointed with the Attorney-General for taking this approach, and I'm also made a commitment to the people in my